watching TBPN.
This week, we'll be recapping WWDC. Apple released liquid glass. It was a little bit controversial. We talked to people that were very optimistic about the new design direction.
I think people settled down in their
I think they eventually settled down.
To themselves, all right, this thing might be pretty nice looking.
Yep.
It's probably will get pretty good, and we'll all move on. And
it also,
they'll probably transition well to VR and other platforms.
Yeah, it also tied really well to Apple's kind of retreat. Ben Thompson wrote about this. Apple is turning over the reins to developers to develop some new AI applications. So we're very optimistic about that. We also had our intern, Tyler Cosgrove. He's making Legos right now. But on Monday, we had him assemble the first American iPhone from scratch. And by scratch, I mean 7 pieces that he had to kind of glue together, but he did it.
It was way more. Give him some credit. It was way more than 7,
maybe 12, but it was fantastic. We had Andrew Huberman on the show. That was fantastic.
That's great.
We got to talk to him about what's going on with NIH budgeting. The proposal is that research funding will drop by 40%. We tried to dig into what pieces of the research budget should we keep. What is the dynamic between the different types of research that are funded, and he really broke it down for us on the back of his 4-hour interview with Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who is the current NIH director. That was a very fun interview. We also went to Y Combinator Demo Day 2025. We were live from San Francisco. We talked to dozens of teams, dozens of founders. We talked to high school dropouts, college dropouts, tons of AI agents. About 90% of the new YC class is AI driven. But we had a bunch of interesting conversations. We also talked to some venture capitalists there, and we shot a lot of confetti.
Where were all the hard tech founders?
We did not see many of them. There were a few, but we mostly got the AI deep dives.
They were among us.
And then we also discussed the Meta and Scale acquisition or investment. Meta is investing something like $15 billion. The deal actually just closed today. And so we had commentary from a number of founders and pundits and journalists and also venture capitalists talking about the nature of that deal and how it came together. And so we hope you enjoy this week's recap, and it gives you a good overview. The timeline's reaction to WWDC, liquid glass, whatever, says Juan. The most important thing in iOS 26, text is finally left aligned. You know, I saw people posting about this. You said this about like the center alignment, left alignment thing. I hadn't noticed it. It looks a lot better left aligned. I don't know why. I didn't know what I was missing.
We'll take it.
Huge improvement.
We'll take it.
Yeah. So now text in iOS notifications left aligned. Huge news. Also,
absolutely massive.
All the different version numbers are now, they're doing car models. So it's iOS 26. They jumped forward a bunch. I believe we were on like 18 before. So they just skipped a bunch.
I can't wait to be in the thousands.
We're in 2025.
In the thousands.
And it's the iOS 26 across everything. So unification there. It's happened in Android a while ago, but now it's come to iOS.
Love it.
Again, a lot of people with negative reactions. We're going to take you through some of the positive reactions. Steve Jobs would have cornered you in a dark alley and beat you with a metal pipe if you suggested something like this. That's what Kitsy says. This was yesterday's reaction. Today, some of the designers are coming out and saying, hey, let them cook. There's a silver lining here.
There's certain examples that are really, really gnarly.
So there's that one super viral one that's like really hard to see, and then people put it next to the Oppenheimer with the blast. Yeah. I think that's a fake photo. I think they adjusted the brightness on that. I don't think that's a deep fake. Not a deep fake. I don't think there's any AI involved. I just think that someone went in there and was like, let me turn up the brightness for effect. And I think that's fake. And I think that also, again, this is a beta. This is something that they're going to be iterating on before it goes out to the masses.
It's honestly a bit weird for a $1 trillion company to launch a beta.
It is odd.
They should just say, no, this is an alpha.
Yes, but it makes sense in terms of like if you are a developer and there's a significant change to the user interface, you want to bake that into your app so that you don't look out of place on day one when everyone updates.
Yeah.
So you got to get the beta into the hands of the developers so that the Airbnb app and the public.com app and the ramp.com app save time and money time is money, save both, easy to use corporate cards, bill payment, accounting, and a whole lot more all in one place. Go to ramp.com. But yes, if you're designing an app, you want it to feel somewhat seamless with the rest of the UI. And if there's UI changes, you gotta test drive those beforehand. You gotta make sure that those are right. So the big question, should we have our intern Tyler Cosgrove over there install iOS 26 beta? You know it's potentially he's on the green screen. Something happened. He's on the green screen. Should we make Tyler install? Oh, there we go. That's where he is really. Like, I'm glad that you did the false background for a minute and make it look like a green screen instead of showing the real.
Yeah, we wanted him to be more approachable.
Yes, we just put a green screen behind him as a fake background.
Yeah. But anyways, back to you. Is that Mykonos? Where are you right now?
Oh, this is just my pool in my backyard.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
This is where you take
sometimes,
podcasts.
Sometimes some of my friends will go on podcasts. They'll just use my backyard.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's what it is.
Anyways, I would love to watch you risk it all and install the update. So why don't you?
Are you willing to do it?
I'll do it. Yeah.
Okay, do it.
He's going to do it for the team. He's taking one for the team.
iOS 26 beta. It could go terribly wrong because the bugs, the thing with the beta is that you can't go back. You can't roll back to the non-beta.
Yeah,
and so you could be living with minor grading bugs for like months until they fix it. Now they fix it pretty quickly. I've done it like once or twice, gone on the beta because I'm so excited. I want to try the new thing.
This is basically intern hazing.
It is hazing. It's
the modern era.
It's the WWDC version. Of hazing is set up.
All right, Tyler. Well, you are brave.
Okay. Good luck with that.
And why don't you get started?
We'll keep checking and then
back
give us the review. We'll be checking in with you to see how the iOS 26 installation process goes, and any problems you run into there. We also have some other.
He's like, guys, I can't read anything on my phone anymore.
We also have some big show updates. Not only do you have Intern Cam now, we also have the breaking news camera. Let's go to it now.
This is crazy too because I can see.
You see this?
Like,
okay, so this is the breaking news camera. When we have breaking news, we cut to the printer. And it prints out. You can read the breaking news. Okay, Jordan, you want to read that to us? Hold it up on the single.
We have some breaking news. If we can switch cameras.
What is it?
So breaking news, Snap to launch smaller, lighter, augmented reality specs smart glasses in 2026.
I'm excited for this.
From CNBC. Thank you to CNBC. Snap on Tuesday announced its plans to release a 6th generation of its augmented reality glasses in 2026 as competition in the smart glasses market continues to heat up. The maker of Snapchat said that its next generation glasses will be called Specs, breaking with the company's spectacles branding that it used for previous. Drop the ackles. Drop the ackles. Just do Specs. It's cleaner.
Well, they dropped the T too, so it's technically drop the tackles.
Drop the specs. Drop the tackles. Just specs. Larger tech rivals like Meta, Apple, and Alphabet are investing heavily into cutting-edge head-worn devices.
Yep. So the
computer will be on your face.
So the most recent edition of Spectacles were released in September 2024 to developers only. That edition of the glasses was available under a leasing model that required users to commit to paying $99 a month for a full year if you wanted to develop for them. So that's $1,200 guaranteed. And then if you want to keep it more, it's probably continues to be $100. So it'll be interesting. It'll run Snap OS operating system, which they developed in-house. Snap said the developers will be able to incorporate Google's Gemini AI models into programs that they develop for smart glasses. So
that's
you could
interesting.
see some sort of exactly. So you could see someone where it's like, okay, you're going to get the glasses, you're going to build something on top
out.
of them.
Google says, hey,
that's where you're going with it. Okay,
I don't know. I think very unlikely, but still,
Well, Snap's market cap, exactly what Meta just paid for a 50% stake in Scale AI, $14 billion. Anything's possible.
Spicy.
So Snap's at $14 billion. The stock hasn't really moved over the past 5 days on this news. It's clearly Snap, staying in the game with the WWDC news, getting a story out there that, hey, we're still in the game, we're moving, and we're doing cool stuff. And I'm excited for this. I think we need more innovation here, more people testing different stuff. And it's clear that with a new format, with a new paradigm of like what the product is, there's a whole bunch of interesting directions you can go, whether there's an augmented reality display, whether it's voice only, whether it's glasses,
it's crazy
prescription
that
glasses, like a whole bunch of different things.
Social media goats, both of them are just not the idea of not being a part of the next platform shift is just
So
an
painful.
idea is a world they don't want to live in, right?
Yep.
They are, both Zuck and Evan
Yep.
are going to be, competing.
Yeah, and so fun. Could be interesting from a developer angle. Obviously, nowhere near the budget of Reality Labs for what Zuck is working on with Meta, but potentially some
constraints,
sort of
they can be good, John.
innovation. I agree.
They can be good.
I'm optimistic. I certainly want to try it. But anyway, let's go back to liquid glass. Ben Thompson gave posted a massive article on Stratechery called Apple Retreats, something like that. You should give it a read. You should subscribe to Stratechery, obviously. Apple's retreat to its core competency. The headline feature of WWDC this year, this is from the latest Stratechery article, was Liquid Glass, a new unified design language that stretches across its operating systems. I will reserve judgment on Liquid's glass aesthetics and usability. Gruber likes it, but I am not one to install developer betas on my devices.
But Tyler will.
But Tyler will. That's why we have Tyler, because I agree with Ben Thompson. It's extremely risky, but he's willing to do it, taking one for the team over there.
I mean, the whole TBPN army. He's really saying, I will sacrifice
I will
myself
fall on
for
the sword.
I will
of
fall on my
developer
sword.
beta. Developer beta. It's okay. If it goes really south, we'll get a new phone. It's always a possibility. But good luck. Hopefully you make it through. Tyler, we'll be checking on you throughout the show. First, let's read Gruber's overview of his reaction to liquid glass, because we saw Timeline hated it. They said Steve Jobs would hate it. Let's go to John Gruber daring fireball.
I think part of it is it was popular to hate on it.
Totally.
And because
everyone loves when
anytime
someone's on a downswing, they love just piling on downwards.
Yeah.
And when everyone's on an upswing, they love just piling on and upwards. It's not.
No, and I think it's also normal if a widely used consumer product does any type of meaningful upgrade.
I mean,
the default is that
there were protests about
it's
Meta
bad.
or Facebook back in the day launching the feed.
Yeah.
They're like, I want to go back to just randomly looking at your profile. I don't want to see random. Everything, every change is always met with some sort of pushback. And then years later, people wind up loving it. I feel like this is something that could grow on me. I'm reserving until we've fully beta tested it on our intern. If he gives it the thumbs up, I'm going to install it. So let's go to John Gruber.
Wow. I mean, it's kind of kind of fun. It's daring and brave and bold to do something like that. And just because Tyler's doing it, doesn't mean you shouldn't.
This type of bravery that Tyler's exhibiting today, I think it might be one day like an exhibit in the Computer History Museum.
Totally.
The bravery he's exhibiting today will be in the history.
They might
books.
even name the next operating system Cosgrove. Cosgrove
Mac OS 27.
Mac OS Cosgrove.
After Tahoe.
It's got an amazing,
it has a nice ring to it.
It's got a nice ring to it. And it just loads with this image. Like that's the default wallpaper.
For the daring and
Mac
brave
OS.
technologist who installed the beta on day 2.
Who did, what everybody said, you're
It was
crazy.
impossible. Everyone
You're
said you're crazy.
It's impossiple.
You're crazy.
You should never do that. But he did it. He took the leap.
He took the leap
and he lives to tell
anyway.
the tale. So
Anyway.
first, this is going back to Ben Thompson's piece. First, handcrafted UI overhauls are the polar opposite of a probabilistic world of generative AI. One is about deep consideration and iteration resulting in a finished product. The other is about in-the-moment token prediction resulting in an output that is ephemeral and disposable. Both are important and creative, but the downsides of that creativity, unfamiliarity in edge cases versus hallucination and false confidence, are themselves diametrically opposed. Apple's historical strengths have always been rooting and designing for finality. In my first year of Stratechery, I did a SWOT analysis. Let's give it up for SWOT analysis.
I love SWOT analyses.
Of the big tech companies instead about Apple. And I think we've talked about this a bunch on the show of like generative AI is inherently imperfect.
Yep.
Apple is about pixel perfection.
Yep.
Apple's product development process is wonderful for developing finished products, but that same process doesn't work nearly as well when it comes to building cloud services. Cloud services are never done. They are best developed by starting with an MVP and then iterating based on usage. This is precisely opposite of what it takes to design a piece of hardware, and it's a big reason why Apple struggles so much with cloud services and why other services companies struggle with products. The canonical example of this, of course, was when the Mobile Me launch, which was delivered fully formed and which, when faced with real-world usage, crashed and burned. Apple's latest offerings are better, but still suffer from too much internal development time per release. This is a hard problem to fix because it touches the core of what makes Apple Apple.
I think it matters. I think it matters whether or not liquid glass is good, because it will be a testament about the state of Apple's strengths. The point of this article, however, is that WWDC was a retreat to those strengths, which is good. This is a bull case. They're not getting over their skis, and they will eventually, I mean, if they're to win, probably defer to the other companies and play to their strengths, and let the other companies win in the places where they are best.
Tim just calling up Sam and saying, Sam, I'm going to need $50 billion here for Siri. Siri, it's yours. $50 billion. $50 billion. You know, if you and Masa can pull together the capital, we can make it happen.
I mean, I keep thinking about Siri, and I keep running through, like, what would it have taken to just replace Siri with a frontier level, simple response model, not even the reasoning stuff, just GPT 4.0 level. You ask it a question and it reads you like a basic response, and not lose the other Siri functionality. And I think that they need to kind of flip the paradigm, because right now Siri is it's basically all tool use. It's basically a router. So it takes in, you ask Siri, what's the weather going to be like tomorrow? And it knows that and all it's doing is picking out keywords weather, and it goes to the weather API internally, and then tomorrow, and it feeds that in, and then it delivers that back. Like ChatGPT kind of flips that around by having the default interaction be much more generalizable, and it can return kind of any result. It can return a paragraph. It can tell you about a historical event, or just talk to you. And then if it needs to use a tool like web search to get you the weather for tomorrow, then it goes and calls that. And so you need to kind of flip that around. I was wondering about like why hasn't what if you rolled back the clock and you were like, okay, Apple just wants to be in the game, what would it take to launch a V2 of Siri? And I was like, well, okay, if they try to partner with someone under the hood without, they don't even have the option of just saying, we are going to partner with Anthropic under the hood, and it's going to be basically white labeled, and no one will ever find out, because there are just too many leakers. It will find out immediately. Yeah. And so Mark Gurman will have the story immediately, and everyone will know. So they won't be able to say this is magically ours, when really it's someone else's, even if they're paying them to be, and there's tons of NDAs. Like
they do with cloud services, right? I don't actually know who's under
I think they do a lot of that, and then I think a lot of it comes down to the privacy angle, is that they want to make certain claims about privacy and ESG and net zero and stuff. And so if they were to just white label another company that didn't have the same reputation in privacy or environmentalism, people would just say, wait, but Anthropic isn't known for their privacy rules as much as possible. So maybe they're training on my Siri results now, and that's a whole thing, and they have to build up Anthropic's brand to have the brand of Apple, which is just, I'm sure Anthropic's doing great, but they're not known like Apple is in terms of how seriously they take it. Yeah. And then in terms of acquisition, obviously there's all the antitrust stuff. We'll get into this with the Scale AI deal, but every major hyperscaler except for Apple now has basically done one of these interesting acqui-hires of a foundation model lab to kind of juice up their AI efforts. And it's kind of been a mixed bag. Maybe we see one from Apple. They certainly have the cash, but it would be a very, very different. It would be a departure from their current strategy. Totally. Anyway, let's go to John Gruber over at Daring Fireball with his review of Liquid Glass. He says, I've got iOS 26 installed on a spare phone already. Oh no. He didn't even use the real phone. Tyler, mistake number one, never install it on your main phone. How's it going so far?
Well, okay, so I'm going to download it. It's 19 gigabytes.
Okay.
So my phone is not, I only have 64 gigabytes on my phone, so I gotta do a
delete everything.
I'm gonna delete everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
you'll delete. Just go to your Photos app, select all the images, delete them all, and then clear the trash, and you'll make more memories. You can always make. You're making more memories all the time.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Just clear out those images, and
good luck.
If you, on a more serious note, if you need. We'll cover your sort of Apple iCloud plan if you need to get those images in the cloud, so you can get.
Yeah, if you need a backup, feel free to expense
26.
it on your ramp card.
Yeah, put it on the ramp.
So Gruber says, I like the new UI a lot. In addition to just plain looking cool, Apple has tackled a lot of long-standing minor irritants. For example, the iOS contextual menu for text selections, the one with cut, copy, paste. For years now, there have been a lot of other useful commands in there, including share at the very end. But to get to the extra commands, you had to tediously swipe. Now, with one tap, you can expand the whole thing into a vertical menu. Elegant. And I agree. I noticed that was getting originally it was just like just copy, just cut and paste, and it was pretty easy. And then they added, if you wanted to bold or italics, you had to swipe over and then click on that and then go to text effects. And there were like 7 different things eventually. Yeah. Good move. Minor update, but important. And this is the polish that Apple's so good at. And then he says, there's some stuff in Mac OS 26 Tahoe I already don't like putting needless icons next to almost every single menu item. But overall, my first impression of Liquid Glass on Mac OS is good too. It's fun, and lots of little details are nice, joyful, and useful in an old school Mac way.
If you love Mac OS Tahoe, you'll love Mac OS Cosgrove. I'll just say that.
It's just going to be a banger. It's going to be the best ever. There's an interesting article in here that Ben Thompson linked to by Sebastian DeWitt about physicality, the new age of UI. He actually posted this back on June 3rd before Apple refreshed this. So there's a lot of... Oh, do we have some breaking news?
I just printed this out because so this was a good post from Signal. He says, watching this WWDC. Thank you, Signal, for the content, and I'm just happy to be back printing.
It's amazing.
It's I don't know how we went a few months without it. So he says, watching this WWDC felt like watching a dinosaur try to do ballet. Technically and aesthetically competent, but spiritually lost. They talked about Apple Intelligence like they just discovered the concept throughout the presentation. There was zero ecosystem thinking and no real attempt to rethink a single interaction model. More importantly, there was zero sense of how to be relevant in a world where interfaces may disappear, apps get abstracted, and AI is the OS. Apple still thinks in icons and widgets while the world is moving towards awareness, intent, and delegation. It'll be interesting to see how much of a penalty they will pay for missing this boat.
Another negative post. Now, Signal did have a couple other posts that were more positive, talking about good stuff.
And I think this is generally why I'm excited about Johnny and Sam's hardware project. Is it's an opportunity to rethink the device from the ground up with AI at the heart versus Apple, which I think, going back to Ben Thompson's position, is smart to play their own game right now and understand that they do have the option of auctioning the sort of Siri out to the highest bidder at some point.
Yeah, I mean, Alex Heath, who we had on the show yesterday, had a good post who said, this is so very clearly designed for an interface that sits on top of the real world, not a phone, something you would need for AR glasses. And so this idea that it's a little awkward now when you see these images of these glass over the background of your phone display. It can look a little too transparent. The contrast ratios are all off. But if you think about if they're really going all in on AR, VR, and they want to project these screens over the real world long term, setting themselves up to really dominate there and not need to do another refresh, could be big. Could be big. Anyway, Mark Gurman liked it.
Spent some time with Trump.
Yeah.
Trump is known for playing 4D chess. Maybe Tim is playing a little 4D chess with Liquid Glass. He's like, screen is going to be, everything's going to be a screen. We're just going to put UI everywhere.
They have a patent for a glass iPhone that you can see through or something like that, or something that actually would appear more like glass or appear transparent. And a lot of the transparent, I feel like a lot of the transparent technologies, it's like the closest we're going to get to just true holograms is if you have a variety of devices that are projecting holograms into glass sheets. And so maybe it doesn't start with your phone immediately because the battery needs to be right there. That needs to be solid. But if you think about a display and you're projecting on that and doing kind of the same waveguides that are happening in reflected augmented reality glasses, you could do that on a monitor or something like that. And so that could be very cool. Mark Gurman had a more positive take take on WWDC. He says, excellent WWDC, cohesive story, deep integration, and continuity across the devices, zero false promises, impressive new UI, and significant new productivity features on the Mac and iPad, but the lack of any real new AI features, despite that being my expectation, is startling. And so people were expecting, maybe there will be a new Siri, maybe they will move the ball down the field in AI, and they did not. Ben Heilack, of course, taking credit for it, as always. You know him from taking credit for the Jaguar rebrand. Now he says, so excited to see to finally see my work from Apple ship. I was the head of design for the WWDC app notifications. They're still a work in progress. We've only had the last year to work on them. Stay tuned.
So is this fake or is this real?
I think this is a brightness adjusted. I think that whoever shared this image turned up the brightness or brought up the lows. It basically decreased the contrast in the Photos app, to make it look worse than it actually would. But I mean, it doesn't even matter, because even if this is the way it looks, this isn't the way it will look when it will ship to people, because it's obvious, and Apple doesn't make these obvious mistakes like this, especially when it comes to design. They might do something that is rough in the short term, but better in the long term, like what I think is happening with the Photos app, where in the Photos app, they are understanding that in the future, you won't want to scroll at all. You will just search, and search will be so powerful because every photo and video will be tagged so thoroughly from AI, and it will understand the context so much that you will just ask it to pull up a photo and it will do it immediately. The problem is that right now, people they haven't switched that UX paradigm to actually go search first, and second. And second, just the tagging is not that good. I had a video clip of Arnold Schwarzenegger from a movie on my phone. I wanted to pull it up, and so I searched Arnold video, and it couldn't find it because the clip that I had started with a black frame, and clearly it's only indexing the first frame. And so if you have a fade in to a picture of your dog, it won't get tagged. Something like that. I don't know if that's exactly what's happening.
I use the text search in Photos quite a bit.
Yep.
I find it searching Coogan, if there's some
that's
document
really good. Yeah,
that has
totally. The text search is fantastic. And even things like objects, there's a picture of a vending machine. You type in vending machine, it'll do a pretty good job. Sometimes it'll miss it though. But these generative AI things, they get to 99.9% accuracy pretty quickly. Apple's just a little bit behind on them, I think. Yeah. Anyway, if you're trying to upgrade your design chops, head over to Figma.com. Think bigger, build faster. Figma helps design and development teams build great products together. We'll go to Willem
on Figma now.
We'll go to Willem. He gives his review of Apple's Liquid Glass, clearly hints at a clear interface, AR glasses, and unifies OS beyond devices. Like iOS 7, I would be shocked if this version of Liquid Glass ships to everyone later this year. Too many accessibility features for a company that pioneered it. Unfortunately, this means it's going to be muddy/blurry. UI design used to be about function. This is decoration. Late Empire feeling. Hate the trend of floating menus that seems to be happening everywhere. It puts useless noise on the edges of the screen. Ultimately, little of this matters when you can now just talk to the computer. Everything is computer. Anyway.
Interesting.
There's an interesting deep dive from this Sebastian DeWitt talking about some of the history here. Speaking of iOS 7, he said, on June 10th, Apple showed off this was in the spring of 2013. June 10th, Apple showed off what would be the greatest paradigm shift in user interface design ever, iOS 7. I remember exactly where I was and how I felt. It was a shock. I love a designer who's just so in the weeds that they remember where they were when iOS 7 dropped.
I had to be there.
If there is indeed a big redesign happening this year, it'll be consequential and impactful in many ways that will dwarf the iOS 7 overhaul for a multitude of reasons. The redesign is rumored to be comprehensive, a restyling of iOS, macOS, iPadOS, tvOS, watchOS, and visionOS in the intervening years between iOS 7's announcement and today. iPhones have gone from simply a popular device to the single most important object in people's lives. So true. The design of iOS affected and inspired most things around, from web to graphic design to any other computer interface. That's why I figured I'd take this moment of obscurity, this precious moment in time where its changes are still shrouded in fog, to savor something, wholesome naivete
Great writer.
of where things are going, so I can let my imagination run wild. what would I do if I were Apple's design team? What changes would I like to see, and what do I think is likely? And then he breaks it down. The shaded age, he goes back to the skeuomorphic era. iOS started out as...
Can we pull up this?
iOS started out as the iPhone OS, an entirely new operating system that had very similar styling to the design language of the Mac OS Tiger dashboard feature. Yeah, I remember this. You could just put the widgets anywhere. It was very messy, all the stickiness.
This was so fun as a kid.
Yeah.
Messing around with all the different widgets.
All the widgets, and then you would swipe
discovering
it
was
great.
Widget. I couldn't. I legitimately felt like a kid in a candy store with
amazing.
widgets.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful time.
So he says the icon layout on iPhone OS 1, it wasn't even called iOS then, it was just iPhone OS, was a clear skeuomorph. Skeuomorphism was the buzzword at the time. You might have heard that word being thrown around. It might surprise you that it doesn't mean it had lots of visual effects like gradients, gloss, and shadows. It actually means that to make it easier for users to transition from something they were used to, in this case phones typically being slabs with a grid of buttons on them, to what they had become. Phones were all screen, so they could show any kind of button or interface imaginable. And yes, there was a whole lot of visual effects in the user interfaces from iPhone OS 1 to iOS 6. In this age, we saw everything from detailed gradients and shadows and simple interface elements to realistically rendered reel-to-reel tape decks and microphones for audio apps. I remember this, the reel-to-reel tape deck in the voice recorder. Pretty remarkable. And like when the directions would actually be like a physical sign that you would see on a highway. It was
so
such a cool design language. I mean, it feels so not Apple now that they've spent 10 or 15 years post skeuomorphism, but it was definitely unique at the time. Having actually worked on some of the more fun manifestations of it during my time working at Apple, I can tell you from experience that the work we did in this era was heavily grounded in creating familiarity through thoughtful, extensive visual effects. We spent a lot of time in Photoshop drawing realistically shaded buttons, virtual wood, leather, and more materials. That became known as skeuomorphic design, which I find a bit of a misnomer, but the general idea stands. Of course, the metal of the microphone was not in fact metal. It didn't reflect anything like metal objects do. It never behaved like the object it mimicked. It was just an effect, a purely visual lacquer to help users understand that the Voice Memos app worked like a microphone. The entire interface worked like this so as to be approachable as possible. Notably, this philosophy extended to even the smallest elements of the UI. Buttons were styled to visually resemble a button by being convex and recessed or raised. Disabled items often had reduced treatments to make them look less interactive. All of this was made to work with lots of static bitmap images. The first signs of something more dramatic did begin to show on iPad. Some metal slider sheen could respond to the device's orientation. So as you... Deleting a note or email did not simply make it vanish off the screen, but pulled it into a recycling bin that went as far as to open its lid and close as the document got sucked in. I remember there was one that would like shred things when you deleted it. They had a bunch of these fun ones. And
you can imagine the Apple designers in that era being like, today I'm moving on from Apple. You know, I was the designer that made the lid open and the thing swoosh into the can.
It must have been so delightful to just be a designer and just like focus on just that one interaction for like weeks, you know?
Yeah, that became a critique of Silicon Valley, was just like you're working on something, like the idea that like something like this doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, but beautiful things matter.
They do.
Even a feature like this, especially in the Notes app of an iPhone, was something that was being used millions and millions of times a day, and is worthwhile to make it beautiful.
And so there was pushback when they went to flat design. The flat age started in iOS 7, introduced an entirely new design language for iOS. Much was written on it at the time, and as with any dramatic change, the emotions in the community ran quite high. I'll leave my own opinions out of it mostly, but whichever way you feel about it, you can't deny it was a fundamental rethinking of the visual treatment of iOS. iOS 7 largely did away with the visual effects for suggesting interactivity. It went back to quite possibly the most primitive method of suggesting interactivity on a computer. Some buttons were nothing more than blue text on white background, like the inbox button. The home screen, once a clear reference to the buttons on phones of yesteryear, was now much more flat looking. one part owing to simpler visual treatment, but also a distinct lack of usage of shadows.
It is hard to look at this after looking at the last era.
Oh, yeah.
Skeuomorphic era was amazing.
Goated.
It was amazing.
It was amazing.
Like, I see why they had to move on in some ways, because
Yeah,
it
of
was
course.
just like the previous era felt, like
It started to feel dated.
yeah.
It felt like
It feels vintage. I mean,
Yeah.
it looks vintage today.
Totally.
I'm sure the kids today will like jailbreak their iPhones back to looking.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a comparison of the original Photos app, which looked like a camera lens, and then the flat design camera app had just a camera icon that was completely flat, and now we're back to a camera lens in the new era.
Yeah.
And so some of that skeuomorphism seems to be coming back with the glass redesign, liquid glass redesign, but not fully.
Yeah.
We're kind of splitting the difference. We're going in a different direction.
I just looked up, do people still jailbreak iPhones?
Yeah.
And Reddit says it's still possible.
Mm-hmm.
The big thing is there's not much need for it. A lot of the things jailbreaking was for have been implemented
Yeah.
into iOS.
Yeah, because the App Store is so robust.
Yeah.
So you can get an app. There's an app for that now. There didn't used to be an app for it. There were many apps that were not available, and on the first iPhone there was not even an app store. So, but why did shadows have to go? They had an important function in defining depth in the interface. After all, looking at the screenshot above actually does it no justice. The new iOS 7 home screen was anything but flat. The reason was that the shadows were static. iOS 7 embraced the notion of a distinct visual layers and using adaptive or dynamic effects to distinguish depth and separation. Why render flat highlights and shadows that are unresponsive to the actual environment of the user when you can separate the icons by rendering them on a separate plane from the background? Parallax made the icons float distinctly above the wallpaper. The notification center sheet could simply be a frosted pane above the content, which blurred its background for context. Johnny Ive spoke proudly at the iOS 7 introduction on how, quote, the simple act of setting a different wallpaper affected the appearance of many things. This was a very new thing. And so they're not losing the depth. They're bringing the depth, and they're actually making the depth more complicated with the liquid glass feature. And some people are frustrated by that. But one thing that they're highlighting is that it's intense from a computational perspective. Everyone was saying like rendering all these new features is definitely going to hurt your battery life because it's so much more. Although Apple is fantastic at integration and they're fantastic at this type of hardware and software integration and these types of renderings, they will probably be very quick. And so I wouldn't expect a disaster, but I would expect a little bit more of a load just from the graphic layer, although it will be heavily optimized. Also, a new thing in the interface was that the UI Chrome was able to have the same dynamics. Things like the header and keyboard would show some of the content. They obscured shining through as if fashioned out of frosted glass. While it was arguably an overcorrection in some places, iOS 7's radical changes were here to stay, with some of its dynamic effects getting greatly reduced. Parallax is now barely noticeable. Over time, its UI regained a lot more static effects. I wonder how much parallax there is. I don't really notice any right now. I mean, I guess when you swipe around, you can kind of tell they're on a different plane, but I might have it turned off. I don't even know. More interface elements started to blend with the content through different types of blur, like the new progressive blur and the button shapes were slowly starting to make a comeback. It settled into a stable state, but it was also somewhat stagnant. For bigger changes, there would have to be a rethink. What would come next couldn't simply be a static bitmap again. It would have to continue the trend of increasingly adaptive interfaces. So he goes on to talk about the age of physicality and Vision OS and kind of where Apple's going, and predicts a lot of what wound up happening. So Ben Thompson, to go back to him, he talks about Apple's retreat to empowering developers and partners. This was your point about maybe Apple will be auctioning some stuff off. We'll see how their service revenue grows over the next few years. But first, let's tell you about Vanta. Automate compliance, manage risk, and prove trust continuously. Vanta's trust management platform takes the manual work out of your security and compliance process and replaces it with continuous automation, whether you're pursuing your first framework or managing a complex program.
It's like a AI golden retriever for mitigating risk and automating compliance. I mean, it's literally a golden retriever turned into software.
It's fantastic.
What the golden retriever does for your yard, Vanta does for your business.
Yes, yeah. It's like having a golden retriever in the office. Yeah. Like you just feel safer.
You do.
Yes.
You do. And you
feel
are
more
safer.
compliant, and you are safer. Ben Thompson writes about Apple's retreat to empowering developers and partners. He says, that's not to say there weren't some notable AI announcements in Apple's keynote. First, Apple announced the Foundation Models Framework. This is a quote from the Apple team. This year, we're doing something new, and we think it's going to be pretty big. We're opening up access for any app to tap directly into the on-device large language model at the core of Apple Intelligence with a new Foundation Models Framework. This was what I was asking Alex about, Alex Heath from The Verge. The question of, hey, even if the models aren't frontier, just the fact that they're happening on device, the speed is very important for a lot of these models, being able to use a model without a connection to the internet. People are still they're still missing internet on planes occasionally, or they have patchy service. Building an app that takes advantage of that and opening that up to the developer ecosystem where you can get really creative and kind of start finding those like niche cases of where AI can help for certain things. You know, we need the beer app, the iBeer app of the AI era. It's coming.
We've been begging for it.
This development. For example, if you're getting ready for an exam, an app like Kahoot can create a personalized quiz from your notes to make studying more engaging. And because it uses on-device models, this happens without cloud API costs. So if you're this like kid developer who maybe doesn't have an economic model yet, you can build an AI product that only uses on-device compute, and you have zero like cloud costs, which is amazing. I mean, of course, there's ways to charge.
Way less attention than it should have.
Yeah, I mean, everyone was expecting it, and it's great, but it is very cool in terms of just you can now vibe code an iOS app that has some sort of AI functionality. It's not going to be incredible. It's not going to be frontier, but you can get something that's served into the store that only uses Apple's APIs and creates an experience that is zero ongoing cost. It's entirely hosted by Apple and runs on the device, which is amazing. I think that's very, very exciting to see where people go with this. They give another example of if you're camping off grid, poring over the hikes you downloaded to All Trails, just describe what mood you're in, and All Trails can use the on-device models to suggest the best option. So doing things like recommendation algorithms on device, much faster, much easier. We couldn't be more excited about how developers can build on Apple Intelligence. And so it's important not to oversell the capabilities of Apple's on-device AI models. Of course, developers who want to create something that is competitive with the output of something like ChatGPT will need to use cloud-based AI APIs. Of course, you got to burn up the H200s to get the really good stuff. But it's like midwit intelligence on too cheap to meter. Not quite super intelligence too cheap to meter, but it's a midwit. That's helpful.
2-digit IQ. Too cheap to meter.
Too cheap to meter. It's really. It's free.
It's bullish.
It's on the device. That reality, however, applies to Apple as well. Part of the folly of the initial Apple Intelligence approach is that Apple was promising to deliver beyond state-of-the-art capabilities on the cheap using its users, processors, and power. What is compelling about the Foundation Models Framework is how it empowers small developers to experiment with on-device AI for free. This is what I was talking about. An app that wouldn't have AI at all for cost reasons now can. And if that output isn't competitive with cloud AI, then that's the developer's problem, not Apple's. At the same time, by enabling developers to experiment, Apple is the big beneficiary of those that discover how to do something that is only possible once you have an Apple device. Second, Apple deepened its reliance on OpenAI, incorporating ChatGPT's image generation capabilities into Image Playground and adding ChatGPT analysis to visual intelligence. That's cool. There is still no sign of the long-rumored Gemini integration or the ability to switch out ChatGPT for the AI provider of your choice, but the general trend toward relying on partners who are actually good at building AI is a smart move. Third, Ben Thompson writes, Apple is incorporating ChatGPT much more deeply into Xcode, its integrated development environment. This is their VS Code competitor that you need to use to write Objective-C apps for if you're building iPhone software. For building apps for Apple platforms, developers can also plug in other models using API keys. Xcode still has a long way to go to catch up to AI-first IDEs like Cursor, but again, partnering with a foundation model maker seems like a much smarter strategy than Apple trying to do everything itself. These are, to be sure, obvious moves, but that doesn't make them any less important, both in terms of Apple's future and also with regard to the theme of this article. Apple's initial success with the Apple II was because of third-party developers, and developers were critical to making the iPhone a sustainable success. Trusting developers and relying on partners may be a retreat from Apple's increasing insistence on doing everything itself, but is very much a welcome one. And so people are also, he quotes Marquez Brownlee here, the Windows Vista update with Aero Glass was a huge part of my childhood, so I'm getting serious flashbacks. It does have a little bit of like the Windows Glass vibes. The biggest part of WWDC was about liquid glass, which has drawn some unflattering comparisons to past Microsoft operating systems releases. Again, I'll withhold judgment until it ships, but there is another Microsoft OS comparison I've been thinking about recently. To me, last year's Siri disaster was a lot like Windows 8. Windows 8 was an attempt to leverage Microsoft's large PC install base into a competitive position in touch-based devices, and it did not go well. Consumers, particularly enterprises, hated the new UI, and developers weren't interested in a platform without users. Microsoft was forced to retreat, and eventually it came out with Windows 10, which was much more in line with the traditional Windows releases. Apple has clearly missed the boat on cutting-edge AI, but what I'm open to is the argument that this was a ship the company was never meant to board, at least when it comes to products like ChatGPT. Meanwhile, I've long been convinced that Apple has gone too far in its attempt to control everything, even tangentially related to its devices. To that end, I understand why many people were underwhelmed by this WWDC, particularly in comparison to the AI extravaganza that was Google I/O. I think it was one of the more encouraging Apple keynotes in a long time, and that's what Mark Gurman said as well. Apple is a company that went too far in many areas and needed to retreat. Focusing on things only Apple can do is a good thing. Empowering developers and depending on partners is a good thing. Giving even the appearance of thoughtful thinking with regards to Apple App Store is a good thing. Of course, we want and are excited by tech companies promising the future. What is a prerequisite is delivering in the present, and it's a sign of progress that Apple retreated to nothing more than that. Let's hear for Ben Thompson. Another great article. Nailed it. Very good.
Hall of Famer.
Anyway.
Future Hall of Famer.
If you're looking for the Apple of sales tax, get on Numeral HQ, sales tax and autopilot. Spend less than 5 minutes per month on sales tax compliance. It's AGI sales tax, baby.
Get on Numeral now.
So,
Just do it.
Sarah Guo at Conviction, former guest on the show, friend of the show, said that Apple transcription is still so bad compared to what's available on the market. They should be embarrassed. Okay, so I agree. I am now in the pattern of if I want to send you a long text with a lot of thoughts, I will go to ChatGPT, I will click the dictation button, I will talk to it, and then I will copy and paste that into the iMessage window.
Do you instruct ChatGPT to synthesize it and organize it?
I don't. I just use it for the transcription.
That's crazy.
I just use it for the transcription. Crazy. I open up the ChatGPT app. I let it transcribe. I don't even send the prompt.
John hits me with one of those bubbles that's like this long. No, you actually don't do that, right? I don't really notice.
You don't notice that I do it. But even if I'm just saying like, okay, I'm walking around. I can't really stop and type.
Here's what we're hitting in the gym. You wake up at 5 a.m. first thing, transcribe the workout. 5 for 5, 225, bench press. Yeah. So basically, I agree it's bad. The question is, why is it bad? Because there are so many companies out there that they could work with, license, buy, partner with. There's a million different ways to solve this problem. Why is it bad? And I was thinking that maybe part of it is, let's say they buy a company that has amazing transcription, and it is discovered that that company trained on data that it didn't fully have access to. Interesting.
All of a sudden, instead of going after some startup with $100 million raised and $50 million in the bank, and you're going to take them for all they're worth, you're going after Apple.
Yeah.
And you can maybe get $1 billion settlement. Yeah. And so that's like a huge liability, and it's also potentially a PR nightmare. Because a lot of Apple customers care about the AI training. Adobe's had to be very thoughtful about this in the sense that like they're like, hey, look, we will let you opt into letting us train our models on your images if you're on Behance or one of these other services. People don't like the idea of training just happening on their hard work generally, and so I think that there's some PR risk, there's some legal risk. but I agree that they need to figure it out.
Way less risk if they're just leveraging a vendor that is giving them.
Even that is like, it's tough for Apple, because if it's like, oh, well, they're working with this vendor and the vendor's not above board. Okay, well, now they're linked in the brand.
But they should also be able to go to somebody like Scale AI or Mercor and just say like, hey, we want to build a transcription product and we're just going to make it ourselves.
I mean, they face backlash when Foxconn has bad working conditions, right? And so if they are partnering with another company and then there's some viral news story, whether or not it's real, that those people, I don't know.
But everything Apple does carries risk.
Yeah.
Even if they have great intentions.
Yeah.
And I don't think that.
I agree. They need to figure it out. And this is something that just feels so easy to move the ball down the field, because they already have a transcription product.
Yeah.
They just need
just make it better.
They just need to make it better.
What are the ways in which we can make it better?
And it's clearly not the modern transformer-based architecture. Yes, they need to do a training run. Yes, they need to build some GPU data centers for it. Yes, they need new training data. But there has to be a way to do that in an environmentally friendly, PR compliant, like do it the Apple way. I'm fine with that, but like, you got to do it, because this is such a basic functionality of a phone now. And the fact that I'm going from one app to the other just because the Siri button isn't, the transcription is just not good. And that would be such an easy thing to just say, hey, we're state of the art in this, because this is something that is actually improves the daily experience of the phone user, for sure. And same thing with
so backwards to have to go in another app just to send a message, transcribe a message.
I mean, I'm fine with them not inventing like the newest paradigm of like deep research. Like that product doesn't need to come from Apple.
Yeah.
But we've had good dictation and transcription for years now.
Yeah.
And it's open source. and it's not even that it's just like open source. I'm sure they can't just like vend the open source model in because of the license, and I'm sure there's the restrictions on that. Like, you're not just going to give Whisper to somebody, like, the biggest company.
We should have somebody that's a big dictation head and have them apply to get a job. No. It's just somebody, just a fan. An Apple fan goes, joins Apple purely to just, beat the dictation drum internally. I feel like it just needs to be a handful of people that are really power users.
Anyway, I wanted to highlight this post from Pirate Wires. They did an interview on April 16th with David Hannemer Hansen. That's DHH of Rails fame. He also works at 37 Signals with a friend of the show, Jason. Screen recordings of Apple's new iOS 26 liquid glass software design appear to show a jumbled, difficult to read apps and incoherent home screen app animations. For a company that built its brand on seemingly impossible feats of technology, Apple now finds itself stuck in a self-perpetuating cycle, falling behind in the AI race, struggling to attract talent needed to catch up, and fumbling product releases. Pirate Wires writer Blake Dodge diagnosed the company's problems in a May interview with 37 Signals DHH. Read the interview in full on the site, link threaded. I recommend you go read it. I won't read it here. You have to go subscribe to Pirate Wires. Also, it has a lot of bad words. But
it does.
He really let loose, and I'm sure there's a lot of insight there.
The regarded state of affairs at Apple.
Yes, not quite family friendly material. But if you're an adult, head over, hit the subscribe button, check it out, and read it in full, because there's a lot of insight there. Anyway, that is the WWE recap. We are going to be assembling the first American-made iPhone.
First ever.
They said it couldn't be done.
Made in the USA.
Made in the USA. We have him set up over there on Intern Cam. Introduce yourself, Tyler. How you doing?
Coming in from Shenzhen, undisclosed situation, place.
Yeah.
So I'm today I'm building an iPhone 4S.
Yes.
It's 14 years old.
We can't start at the 16 max.
Yeah.
Right?
We're going to be on the trailing edge for a while. But if he can do a 4S, then tomorrow he gets to the 5, maybe the 6, maybe the 7, starts working through them. Production team, can we show what he's working with right now, what he has? Okay, so he has the front, the back, the screen, some innards, I don't really know what's in there. It seemed like the battery might
He
have been made out
has
of rubber
got
or
a
plastic.
long stream ahead of him.
Yes, so we will be
People say-
checking in on him throughout the show, learning what it takes to assemble an iPhone in America. They've said it's impossible, but I think today we might just prove them wrong.
I mean, Tyler's conviction this morning has been insane. I asked him, "Are you nervous? Are you
Yes.
afraid? Are you afraid at the possibility of failing on the sort of the
stage, the world stage?" Yeah.
And he said, "No,
No.
I got this. I got this." So let's see how it plays out.
Anyway.
Tyler is going to be well.
Oh, he's working.
to,
He's
do
slicing.
something
Let's
like
go
that.
to the slice cam.
Let's go to the slice cam. What's going on, Tyler?
He's trying to remove the pieces from the board because this, of course, was a piece of art that you buy and it comes. And so he's the
It's really
first
stuck on
challenge.
there,
Old
guys.
golden retriever mode.
Really
First, he's
stuck
got to
on
get
it.
the pieces.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to get the pieces off the board because it's been stuck there as an art object, and then he will have to assemble them. He told us that he doesn't have any screws, which could be a major setback.
I have
he's
some
got
glue
hot
here.
glue.
He has
I've got
glue.
some glue.
Okay.
I'm feeling really confident right now, guys.
Okay, good.
There we
This
go.
is going to be
There
the
we
most
go.
American-made iPhone. There's just going to be glue everywhere. It's going to be a mess.
Any
Curry
politician
favor.
says, "Hey, we saw Tyler, TBPN's intern, make an iPhone in America.
Yep,
we
we
think
went-
you guys should actually,
Make
take
this
this
happen."
seriously. Why don't you take a plane?
He's making progress.
Making progress. Look at him
He's got
go.
2 or 3 down.
Look at him go.
That's good.
I've almost got everything deconstructed. Soon I can start putting it back together.
There we go.
But
Amazing.
Doing great.
We knew you were going to crush it, so we tried to make it a little bit harder, force you to deconstruct it first,
Yeah.
and then put it back together. So
This is hilarious. A lot of the reinforcement learning is now done on like extremely hard math problems, and so you might need to go to PhD programs to recruit.
we
these
should
folks.
offer, like maybe physical intelligence or another lab the data from Tyler,
Yes.
making this iPhone to train on.
Definitely.
Because I
Yeah, we need
wouldn't
to get him in
want
a
potential training
Rococo
data to
body,
go to waste.
Yeah, a bodysuit so that he's really able to track all the mechanics. We need every digit on his hand tracked so that we
This
can.
might be
feeding
the
that
first
in.
time an iPhone has been assembled by somebody wearing a tailored suit as well.
So we're breaking all sorts of records here. Can you talk a little bit more about what it actually takes to produce a solar panel in America? It doesn't seem as complicated as building an iPhone potentially, but maybe it is.
No, it's much simpler.
I don't think iPhones are even that complicated. we have
an
our intern
over
here. I don't know if you
making
can
an
see.
iPhone in America.
He's
It's going
making the
great.
first USA-made iPhone this morning.
Cut to Tyler. How's it going, Tyler? Give us the update.
I'm now attaching the volume buttons. But I've got the front on. I've got the home button on.
Okay.
I'm feeling really good right now.
Feeling really good.
Great,
Okay, we're
great.
making progress
Faster.
over there.
No,
That's
to be
good.
clear, once you're done with that assembly, TBPN intern, you need
Yes.
to go back to starting with rocks and then make
Yes.
the iPhone from rocks. I've got
Okay.
rocks in my
Yeah.
backyard, so I'll give you some rocks. I'll mail them
Okay.
to you,
Okay.
and then you turn that into an iPhone.
That's fantastic.
That's the next. That's level 2. That's level 2.
Yeah.
In other
we're
news, we
excited.
have our intern here in the studio assembling an iPhone from scratch. Not really from scratch, but I don't know if you can see, but he's getting it together. He's assembling the
great.
first iPhone in America, and so I think that's more of our focus today.
Oh God! I
is-
said iPhone manufacturing would never happen in America. I think
We
this
proved
It's
you
happening.
wrong.
This is the first
wrong.
American-made device.
the
American-made
first,
iPhone.
you're witnessing history.
He's starting. It's a 4S, so we couldn't go all the way to whatever the 16 or the 17, whatever we're on now.
Yeah.
But we had to start somewhere.
We have our intern. We have our intern in the studio today, making the first iPhone in America. It's happening. It looks like he's done. Give me the update.
I'm getting pretty close.
He's getting pretty close.
Missing most of the kind of external things here. I got the volume buttons, home button. I got
Okay.
to put in the battery, the main
Okay.
kind of chip motherboard.
Okay.
But feeling pretty good. I'm probably 80% of the way there.
80% of the way there, less than an hour and a half in. I think this is going fantastically. I wasn't sure if this is possible, but it looks like it's happening.
We're bringing the iPhone back to America.
Yeah. Okay. Give me
Any advice, Aaron, for Tyler?
I was about to ask. Yeah. What's the advice for our intern who's assembling the iPhone in America for the first time? What tools does he need? What are the key steps to really reshore manufacturing? Tyler,
mean,
I'm
there's
seeing
hardly-
lots of pieces that didn't go in that phone.
Yeah, take it apart.
I'm not done yet.
Take it apart. Put it back
Oh,
together.
he's not done yet.
I got
okay.
yeah. Just testing the piece.
Aaron, what does it take to reshore the iPhone?
Does he? I mean, are we going to give him a gong ring for this? Because I mean, it's a lot of grit, right?
We're watching
So
history. So cultural shift is what I'm hearing.
yes, I mean, massive cultural shift, which is underlined by a lot of other factors too. So
Okay.
I think that infusing and transforming the industrial base through technology gives a lot of incentive for people to jump back in and join. We're not trying to go back to the 50s here.
I mean, you said the plants are smaller, like not an entire island, but I imagine that it's not something I can put on my desk. How big are we talking?
Yeah, no, unfortunately, your intern cannot make one of these at his standing desk like the iPhone.
Not yet.
I don't know. Look at him. This guy,
You're talking
Tyler
about the
can do
man who
anything.
built the
Tyler
first
can do anything.
American iPhone.
What is
I think
he doing?
he's doing well.
He's making the first USA-made iPhone.
He's doing well. He had to take it back apart to put the battery in. Oh, the battery's going in now.
Putting the battery
it's looking
in.
good. The battery's in.
Gosh.
He's doing great. Will Apple announce iPhone assembly in the United States before September? It's like
We
a
did.
4%
We
chance,
beat him to it.
But we beat him to it. Let's go to Tyler and see how is the project going, Tyler?
looks-
Break it down for
Well,
us.
guys,
Okay.
it's done.
It's done.
The first American iPhone.
Manufactured
Wow.
in America. Assembled in
So,
America.
Wow.
It's maybe not the cleanest, maybe not the most perfect. It's kind of a coin flip whether it would pass the inspections, but
Quality assurance. But you did it.
I genuinely can't believe you did it.
I
I
can't
was
believe you
staring,
did it.
looking. I was staring, looking at the pieces
Yeah.
earlier, and I was kind of concerned because I thought we've given Tyler an impossible task.
Yep. And,
And he
we're
did it.
now 3 hours and 20 minutes into the project, and it's successful.
yeah. I
So
mean,
now-
look, I'm more of a software guy, machine
Yep.
learning engineer kind of guy.
Yep.
Not big on hardware, but this process, I'm incredibly bullish on bringing manufacturing back to the United States.
You think it could be done?
Okay, if I can do it, surely in
Anyone
the factory
can.
it's gonna be
Not
more
necessarily
second.
anyone, but
But if you have a college degree.
we got to kind of get into the economics now and understand, Tyler's market value.
hours.
Tyler's market value probably,
Yeah.
$250,000 a year.
Yep.
Took him 3 hours. We're getting
you run
some,
through it. It's,
potentially some margin problems.
Yeah, we've been talking about the $10,000 iPhone. I think we might be looking at it. You get an iPhone
yeah.
4S handmade by a college-educated
You would-
machine learning engineer.
But imagine, in
Yeah.
a lot of cars, like the person that made the engine
Yes,
will
signed
sort of
it.
sign
Yeah.
it. Having an iPhone that was sort of signed on the back by
yeah.
Tyler.
Why don't we get a Sharpie for Tyler? You can sign the back of that. We
Sign
can give
the
it away to
iPhone.
one of the fans.
I'm thinking of starting like a kind of boutique, handmade phone company now.
I think that's good.
Yeah, you just-
made with love.
Yeah.
just buy the new iPhone, take it apart, put it back together, sign it.
Sign it. Yep.
It's a
Assembled
handmade
here.
iPhone.
Assembled here.
Amazing. Honestly,
Fantastic
genuinely
work.
incredible work.
Really great.
They said it couldn't be done. And,
We proved them wrong.
And you proved them
Anything
wrong.
is possible in America with enough dynamism.
With enough
and we
Tylers.
saw it today.
With enough Tylers.
With enough Tylers, and we can accomplish anything. Welcome to the stream, Andrew. How are you doing?
Great to see you.
Thanks so
What's
much for
going
joining.
on?
Yeah, what's new in your world?
What's new? Goodness, this week we have a big episode of the Huberman Lab podcast out with the current NIH director, Dr.
Yes.
Jay Bhattacharya, who's a MD and a PhD. He's a unique background because he has a background in medicine, obviously, the MD, but he also has a background in economics.
Yeah.
And incidentally did his undergraduate, master's, PhD, and medical school training, and then was a professor of medicine at Stanford.
Oh,
so
that's Stanford.
he's Stanford the whole way. And as NIH director, right, he holds a ton of power over what happens for the future of basic and clinical research. And he looks at all of that through the lens of an economist, but mostly through the lens of a public health official. So it's a very unique perspective. And
Yeah.
folks on X will recognize
really-
Jay.
Yeah,
One
yeah.
of our vocal. I don't want to speak for him and label. We have to be careful with labels, but
Totally.
anti-lockdown. I don't know.
Yeah.
Not a huge fan of the lockdowns for most people, right? He does say that there are certain populations that he felt should have been kept indoors, but other folks probably, in his view, should have had more actions. Yeah.
Well, it's a long episode. I wanted to basically get a preview of it. You guys focus on a couple things. One, how to fix the issues with science, and two, the importance of funding research, both basic research and then applied research. So why don't we kind of cover a couple of those different
my
areas.
big question was like the narrative right now is that research funding is being cut like immensely, and I was wondering if you got a feel for how severe the cuts are. Is the narrative overblown? What is the balance of cuts between applied and basic research? And then we can kind of go into some of the implications of that.
Sure. Okay. So there is an upcoming vote in Congress in September, I believe, and it's on the table to cut the overall budget for research for NIH by 40%, 40.
That's huge.
Which is huge.
That's huge.
I want the budget for research at NIH. There are multiple dimensions to NIH, and I don't want to get lost in the weeds of it. It's NIH is something I'm very familiar with. I was on grants panels for over a decade. My lab was funded by NIH. We could go really deep into the weeds, but let's just keep it pretty simple. NIH funds basic research, which is research that it's not specifically geared toward understanding or trying to solve a particular cure or treatment for a disease. So think everything we understand about cell biology, not everything, but much of what we understand about cell biology was because of NIH funded research into the functioning of the cell over the course of 50 or more years. And that led to important implications for treatments and cures for cancer. We don't have a quote unquote cure for all cancers, but many cancers now can be cured.
And to be clear, these are non-commercial. This is like non-commercial research. So things that we cover a lot of,
right?
Yeah, we cover a lot of.
Cannot be patented. So basic research is, a laboratory wants to understand how cells work, how neurons work, how the immune system functions, gut-brain axis. Studies on how stress impacts health, sleep, et cetera. Then the applied work is also funded by NIH. So clinical trials are funded by NIH. This is an enormous portion of the overall budget. The exact division between basic and clinical trial funding is hard to demarcate. But let's just, for sake of this conversation, just agree, because it's true that most of the basic research and clinical trials that are run in the United States are funded by the NIH. The NSF is a separate entity, right? But NIH, its specific goal is to improve the health and longevity of American citizens, and by extension, the rest of the world, right? Because it is fair to say that while there are excellent, research funding bodies in the UK and Germany and Switzerland and all over Asia and around the world, that the NIH, when people say it's the crown jewel, it's the one that's devoted the most billions of dollars to basic and applied research. And it's no coincidence that the majority of Nobel Prizes in physiology and medicine and chemistry and related fields have come from work that was either initially seeded by or certainly supported by the NIH. So you can't overstate the importance of NIH funding basic and applied research. That overall budget is facing a 40% cut in September. Now, I'm hearing two things out there, right? I wear many hats. One is my lab ran on NIH money. It no longer depends on NIH money. I'm a podcaster, so I have the ear of folks who are like, this is really scary, right? That it gets very political because the current administration seems to be taking a more they're going to revise the way that NIH is structured, potentially 20 plus institutes down to 8. So all of it looks at like downsizing. There are a lot of people who are terrified about this. Okay. There's another camp that I hear from a lot, and I can't even say particularly on X. And I want to be very clear, this camp doesn't always lean right. It's pretty even across the board, that are saying, wait a second, why are we giving so much money to these universities to do research from our tax dollars? And I know this will upset people who are very science-minded, as I am, who care about science, but they're saying, why are we doing this, right? Some of these universities, not all, but some of them, Stanford, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, UT Austin, et cetera, the private universities often, although some public ones too, have very large endowments. And they're thinking, why are we funding so much of this work? Maybe these tax dollars should go elsewhere. There's another key issue, and this came up during the discussion with Dr. Bhattacharya, which is there are many, many people, who voiced to me that they don't want to give their tax dollars to basic or applied research at all. Okay, this is a large and growing crowd because they feel that there needs to be, for lack of a better way to put it, some truth and reconciliation, right? They want two things acknowledged. And I've actually heard this from many of the, let's just say, the highly recognizable names in the world of Silicon Valley super tech or founders and funders and investors, et cetera. And those two things are the following. One, they want the NIH to acknowledge, or CDC and or others in government to acknowledge that there were, in their mind, failures during the pandemic, in particular, lockdowns that impacted the non-laptop class, okay? We're talking about janitors, staff, teachers, kids, et cetera, that basically had to halt their work and their income. They're pissed off about this, right? That no one's kind of acknowledged this. The other thing that they're very angry about is the lack of acknowledgement from the scientific community that the science community makes errors. Sometimes errors that, for instance, in the field of Alzheimer's research, I want to point out not all the work in the field of Alzheimer's is bad. Much of it is very solid or excellent, but they are frustrated by some recent unveiling of the fact that there were findings that later were found to be fraudulent, basically, and that it was never checked up on. And then that opens up a whole discussion, which I also discussed with Dr. Bhattacharya, about what's being done to solve the so-called replication crisis. So they're upset about the public messaging around health and science, right? They would have preferred, it sounds like, that people in government say, hey, listen, we have a virus that we don't understand, and we have ideas about what might control it, but we don't fully understand this. So it was very iterative, and a lot of people are pissed off, kind of like when you're 15 or 16 and you're being told you can't stay out late, and then your parents are staying up late, or or like we had governors who were saying you had to wear a mask, but then we're taped in fancy restaurants on the northern coast, at restaurants, and like much in the way that a teenager goes, wait a second, like you smoke pot in college and you're telling me not to smoke pot, like there's a logical flaw here, and we at least need to talk about it. So there's this kind of notion that this isn't my stance necessarily. I'd be happy to share my stance, but that the scientific community has kind of cloaked its errors. And so there are a lot of people in the general public, they're like, don't give these universities a dime, let them dip into their endowments. And the last thing I want to say about that is not every university has large endowments. Most public universities do not have large endowments. It's also true that universities don't like to spend their endowments, and the typical way that they hide behind their endowments or endowment spending is to say that money is earmarked for other things, right? So which is not to say that it isn't, but and then the last thing, and I know I'm going kind of fire hose here, but I want to make sure this comes out, is that the big issue that is really on the table as well is this notion of indirect costs. You guys are finance guys. So basically a laboratory might get a grant of $1 million across 4 years, so $250 a year for 4 years. And the university then gets what are called indirect costs. They get, let's say, $500K typically. It's anywhere from $300K on the million to up to $750K on the million. There are a few cases of even more than that. The so-called indirect funds that take care of administrative costs and the basic costs of doing research. And earlier this year, the Trump administration said, we're cutting that to 15% across the board for all universities. And that was very prominent on X because Elon retweeted it and a number of other people retweeted it. And I would say, while the indirects have been very controversial, I just personally, it's my view, okay, this is my personal view, is that a severe cut to the indirects, while on the face of it might sound good, that's going to disproportionately hurt the public schools without large endowments, okay, because they don't have money to dip into. And something more in the range of 30% seemed reasonable to me based on my understanding of what those funds are used for. But historically, there have been some challenges with indirects. There were universities, I won't mention which, caught for spending some indirects on things that were unrelated to the science, perhaps keeping the lights on in the English department. That's typically not the case now. It's for disposal of radioactive waste. It's for janitors, it's for painting the walls of the building, but it's not for making, a lavish lifestyle for the administrators, right? If administrators have a lavish lifestyle, it's presumably through some other mechanism, not IDC.
Yeah, there was some example, I don't know if it was UCSF or some school where they had like a multi-$100 million administrative budget, and I think people really wanted to push on that. But I think your concern is obviously there's this massive trust issue between the public and new parts of the administration and science. And how do we rebuild that trust without destroying the entire system, right? Is that kind of...
You nailed it. And I would like to just highlight in the backdrop of all of this, there is one very major emotional issue that I'm going to catch a lot of heat for this, but I don't really care anymore. And we're on X. So,
Yeah.
I put out a post recently that said, hey, listen, I'm very concerned about this 40% overall cut as the most severe damage to science. We're not talking about allocation. We're not talking about indirects. We're not talking about what's going to happen with that body of money. We're just accept this 40% cut. And I'm very concerned about this. But I don't want to talk about, for instance, the fact that federal funding to Harvard or to Columbia has been frozen. And a lot of people said, well, why not? I have a lot of friends at Harvard Med and at Columbia and elsewhere, and they're like, wait, why won't you talk about that? Well, that's actually a different issue, right? The reason that money has been frozen is that in the eyes of the administration, Harvard and Columbia are violating civil rights laws. Until that's resolved, there's no discussion about NIH to be had. That's not an NIH issue. It funnels through NIH money.
Yeah, people are tying the issue, even though just because it has some of the same buzzwords. Yeah. That's interesting. I have a question about the 40%. I mean, there is a world where what becomes important is the ranking of what gets cut. And so my question is, like, within the basic research that you're seeing, what should we be fighting for hardest to keep? What basic science or applied science research are you most optimistic about going forward? Because we saw this with GLP-1s. I mean, I'm sure, or CRISPR, this stuff was NIH funded at one point. There was a ton of research, and then we get this big boom, but it's 10 years later. What's on the frontier? What are you most excited about? And what should we be fighting for? Let's keep the funding there no matter what.
Yeah, great question. In fact, the most important question. So regardless of whether or not this 40% cut happens, if it's less, if it's kept the same, a couple of things. First of all, despite the fact that NIH funds basic research and that many laboratories, including my own for many years, focused on basic research, like how does the visual system work? We always had an eye, every laboratory has an eye toward, what the translational implications could be. Sure. Okay. So we were actively involved in trying to solve blindness due to glaucoma, even though we were focusing on some basic questions. So I think it's a statistical issue. If you step back and you say, okay, in the field of, let's just say, vision, my former field, what is the leading cause of blindness? Cataract. But you know what? You can fix cataract. You can slide out the lens and you put in a new lens. That's being done now. Great. What's the second leading cause of blindness? More than 70 million people worldwide. Glaucoma. You can test for eye pressures, but once the cells in the eye start deteriorating, people go blind. There's no recovering those cells. So you could say, wow. So let's take the top. Let's take the statistically the top causes of blindness, and let's fund those, okay? Retinitis pigmentosa, et cetera. You could do this for pretty much any field. So in the field of brain health, you'd say, okay, dementia, you'd say major depression, you'd say a stroke, you'd say, I'm gonna piss off some people because I'm not gonna mention their particular suffering, here. But it's not hard to find Parkinson's, right? MS. I mean, it's not hard to know what the problems are to tackle. The problem is deciding what the targets are. Sure. And as you mentioned, like with CRISPR, I mean, in many ways, it was a fortuitous thing, right? Doudna Lab was working on bacteria. I mean, it's very hard to predict what basic research is going to lead into these different areas, but we know what the critical areas are. So I'm not trying to dodge your question. I do want to say that the emphasis from MAHA on chronic disease and chronic health issues, I think has concerned some of the people in the scientific community because, listen, I, as a podcaster that covers science and health, will be the first to say that if you're not sleeping well, your mental health and physical health is not going to be good. You can miss a few nights sleep, but if you're chronically sleep deprived, you're sicker than you normally would be. If your gut health isn't proper, if you're not getting exercise, if you're not getting sunlight, if you're not doing these things, of course, right? But I think that people who are in the kind of hardcore mechanistic science community, like, great, we're all going to strive to do those things, and we should, but not at the exclusion of figuring out signaling pathways that are vital for, like the GLP-1s are a beautiful example, right? This peptide acts at the level of the brain and the gut to make people feel more full. It also, by the way, shut down the debate as to why people are fat. It's because they eat too much, right? They eat more than they burn. Remember, people used to argue about it?
Totally.
No, GLP-1s silenced that. It's like,
that's really true.
Now, are they eating too much because of a hormone issue related to having too much fat? Maybe there's some depression. Sure. Like, I fully acknowledge, like, I'm not trying to be completely insensitive, but we isolated the problem by understanding that this peptide discovered in the discovery of this is worth spending 2 sentences on.
Please.
Gila monster, a reptile that doesn't need to eat very often, makes a lot of this peptide that it turns out is manufactured by humans too. And if you increase it 1,000-fold in humans, you're not hungry anymore. And so I think that, the guy studying the Gila monster, I doubt was thinking about curing obesity, but there you go. Now, and of course, there's a debate to every one of these things. No medication should ever replace lifestyle factors, right?
Yeah.
There are many, I think we sometimes fail as healthy, fit people. We fail to understand that lifestyle factors are very hard for people to implement, even if they have copious amounts of disposable income and some free time. It's just tough. Yeah. It's just tough. It's hard to do. And so I think that the emphasis on nutrition and exercise is wonderful. I don't think anyone on either side of the political debate would argue that MAHA in principle, Make America Healthy Again, isn't a great thing. Yeah. I think what they probably would appreciate hearing, now I'm speaking for kind of the more science, mechanistic, biology-minded folks, they'd probably like to hear a little bit more about, hey, there are probably signaling pathways in the brain that are relevant to to depression that maybe a next class of antidepressant drugs would probably be good. I don't think anyone would say there's no need to develop antidepressant drugs. We probably take too many of the ones that don't work and have too many side effects, but as a country. But when you say what are the most important things, what we really need is a very rationally grounded planning committee to sit back and say, you know what, we're going to put X number of dollars towards this, X number of dollars towards that, X number of dollars towards this. And this is where I think Dr. Bhattacharya really shined on the podcast. He said, and I would totally agree, and I have already, my phone's been blowing up with some anger from colleagues about this. Much of the work that's funded by NIH, here's the dirty secret, is already completed because they tend to fund things that are very certain to be completed. And so people put forward grants based on work and preliminary data showing I can do this and it's already kind of worked out, then they use the money for the next iteration. This is the dirty secret of every NIH-funded lab. And it tends to favor a kind of more pedestrian science. Then they use foundation money and they use other sources to kind of do the high-risk stuff. But if you were to look at like one of the more impressive funding bodies in science, like the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, right, gives the equivalent, HHMI folks, as they're called, they always say it's not that much money. But we can do the test. We can take away their money and we can see how well they do or don't do. They don't like doing that. It's like being on academic steroids, right?
Yeah.
It's the equivalent of 3 grants per year, basically, NIH grants per year. Yeah. And more money translates to, when it's excess money, I know that word excess money scares investors, especially if they're taxpayers. But if that money is being used to fund really bold hypotheses, like it's my opinion that every single peptide, not just GLP-1, every single peptide shouldn't be getting tested in the gray market of like gyms and like biohacking. Frankly, that's bullshit.
Yeah, and isn't the reason that we don't have good studies on a lot of peptides is it's not profitable to study them because they're effectively naturally occurring and you can't patent it's too late. Am I correct there?
Like BPC 157, right? You hear about that all the time is, will it accelerate healing? The animal studies are solid. There's no human studies. My good friend Peter Attia is like, I'm not going to touch that stuff. There's no clinical data in humans. And the rest of us are like, well, I take it and it works. And there's no reason for a drug company to take it. I'll take it transiently for like a joint issue.
Yeah, but the core issue, I've taken it too. Yeah. I've benefited from it. I recommended it to John a couple of weeks ago. He had an injury. I just said, hey, I'm not going to this is not something I'm going to take, weekly for my entire life. But in certain instances, but break down that specifically that you're saying because it's effectively science. There's no real ability. Would a drug company have to create some variation of it in order to patent it? Is that? Yeah,
in fact, I'm going to catch heat from everybody, but the pharma companies that make GLP-1s, most people have realized that GLP-1s are very expensive, and at the dosages that they're typically prescribed, people get some discomfort. And so the new thing is people get it compounded at a compounding pharmacy, and they're microdosing GLP-1s. The number of women that I know who are microdosing GLP-1 in service to the spring and summer outrageous, right?
Yeah,
And,
outrageous.
yeah, it's outrageous. And the idea is that GLP-1 is a good example. I mean, again, insulin's a peptide, but there are many peptides. Like, for instance, I'm very excited about this peptide pinealin for sleep, right? And it's for some other properties too. But there's no reason why a drug company would go patent pinealin. They're busy patenting drugs like the recent class of drugs, the DORAs. This is an interesting story. Work on a peptide called hypocretin. This peptide is involved in generating wakefulness. It's also in the feeding pathway. And there's a new class of sleep drugs that suppresses the wakefulness pathway as opposed to making you more sleepy, so lower abuse potential. The DORAs have been released, right? They maintain the architecture of sleep pretty well compared to other sleep drugs like Ambien, et cetera. Here's the issue. They're about $325 a month. So for a lot of people, that's prohibitively expensive, and they're patented.
Yeah, to put it in context, that's a luxury gym membership.
Right, right.
Which is
pinealin probably costs you, and I'm not suggesting people take pinealin. I'm not a physician, so talk to your physician, and then ignore him or her if you choose. Don't do that on my suggestion. But it would cost you about $15 a month, right? And it's for me personally has allowed me I get 2.5 hours of REM sleep a night in a 6-hour sleep bout. So I've shortened my sleep bout to about 6 hours a night with a lot of deep sleep. And the pinealin, is it completely safe? Reasonably, but we don't know. We don't have clinical trials. Now, I'm willing to run that experiment on me, but are you willing to run that experiment on you is the question. And that's where it gets down to personal freedoms. And that's I don't want to cover too many things here, but I will say that Robert Kennedy has been pretty vocal about, at least before the election, about wanting things like peptides and stem cells and supplements to be more widely available. The truth is they're pretty widely available now. And I will put an asterisk on stem cells. I know a very prominent public-facing physician who was almost paralyzed permanently from a stem cell injection into the disc of his back. I talked to a neurosurgeon friend who ultimately saved his life, by the way. This is a well-known story within the wellness community. And he said, the discs can't accept stem cell injections. But if you go down to Mexico or you go out of country and you say, my back is hurting, they'll inject stem cells into the disc of your back. So is this to say that stem cells are bad? No, they're not ready for clinical use yet. And the United States has been very careful about things like this, because before they were careful, there was a clinic down in Florida that injected some stem cells into the eyes of people with macular degeneration who were worried about going blind. And guess what? They all went blind right away, permanently. So I do want any discussion about peptides and these kind of things. When you get into the realm of stem cells, it starts getting to be a serious matter. So I don't want to give the impression that I'm like, try this, do that, shoulder hurt, put some stem cells in. When you're talking about stem cells, you're talking about cells that can become essentially anything, including tumors.
Yeah.
So
I'm curious. I mean, you and Rob, I feel like do such a good job of threading the sort of needle around having conversations without giving endorsements for specific things that are untested and really focused on understanding, helping people understand the world, the science themselves, and then take the actions that they themselves, as well as their doctors believe they should take. Do you think that podcasters generally in health don't really understand broadly the responsibility they have? I remember when I was in college, there was a popular tech podcaster at the time that would pretty much widely endorse microdosing, right? And I looked up to this guy, right?
Psychedelics, right?
Yeah, psychedelics, right? And in hindsight, I look back on that and I'm like, that is so wildly irresponsible to basically recommend, that there's microdosing. For some people report tremendous benefits, but to sort of broadly endorse something in hindsight feels insane. And I don't think people fully grasp the responsibility that they have and just how much impact they can have on an individual or how a community thinks about something.
Yeah, I mean, Rob and I, we take it super seriously. I mean, I've taken heat for a bunch of things in the larger science community, but probably one of the things I've taken the most heat for is my belief that certain supplements can be helpful, not as a replacement for good behaviors and for prescription drugs. I'm a fan of certain prescription drugs. Listen, I read an episode on ADHD and talked about the prescription drugs and took a ton of heat from the kind of natural folks. And then I did one on behavioral tools for ADHD and took a lot of heat from the folks who said, hey, listen, my kid got a lot of benefit from taking stimulants for ADHD. So we do weave back and forth and on that kind of knife edge, and it can be tricky. In terms of microdosing, because I saw it come up in the comments before today's discussion, and so it's just kind of flagged in my mind. The data on microdosing psilocybin are basically clear that it's not known to have any major effect on major depression or some of the other things that psilocybin is being tested for clinically, including major depression, PTSD, et cetera. The data from clinical trials out of Robin Carhart-Harris's lab at UCSF and elsewhere on high dose psilocybin, so macro dose, right? 2.5 grams. 4 grams is the quote unquote heroic dose if you're speaking Northern California language. Those dosages done in pretty maybe 2 weeks apart or so, with the support of a clinical staff going into it, through it, out of it, et cetera, have been very successful in those trials for the treatment of depression. Microdosing has shown very little effect. MDMA was put up to the FDA last year as a potential treatment for PTSD. It has not been approved. It did not pass approval. Unfortunately, as a component of those trials, there were some sexual improprieties in one of the clinical conditions that, all it takes is one bad incident, right? And then it was but it cued people to this larger theme. How are you going to protect patients who are really, they're not incapacitated, but they're not in a position to really advocate for themselves, that you need probably multiple clinicians in the room and checks and balances. So I think ultimately it will be approved. The remission rates on PTSD, by the way, from properly dosed and spaced MDMA is remarkable, up to somewhere between 60 and 70% remission rates on PTSD. Wow. And the new thing that people are very excited about is Ibogaine or Iboga, 22-hour psychedelic journey. This has been tested largely from Nolan Williams' lab at Stanford. Seems to, in 1 or 2 sessions, it has led to a significant number of veterans essentially ceasing their alcohol use disorder, what is typically called alcoholism and opioid use disorder. But you need to be heart rate monitored while you do this. The point here is that any discussion that we have on the podcast is, as you can tell, I'm not known for being very succinct. It's for a reason, right? You have to flesh out the conversation around these things. You can't just say psilocybin is good, MDMA, works, great, remission. People can really get hurt. Yeah. And I think discussions around whether or not you take magnesium threonate or bisglycinate before sleep, you can probably speed through those a little more quickly. But when you get down to things about psychoactive drugs, in particular Schedule 1 illegal psychoactive drugs, when you get down to things about hormone therapies, you're just trying to get into the realm of where people can really screw themselves up. That said, there are a number of things that I hope that the NIH and the public health messaging going forward will be more expansive about, which are drugs that are currently prescribed at enormous rates in the United States and elsewhere, for which there are very severe side effects. There's this whole thing about people taking finasteride and dutasteride, men, to keep their hair, and getting permanent sexual dysfunction, right? Permanent sexual dysfunction. Some of them killing themselves as a consequence of this. These are young guys. It's clear those drugs have very different effects in young people versus old. Some people can use them safely, some people can't. These are FDA-approved drugs, as well as, I think we're finally coming around to the idea that the SSRIs can be very useful for things like OCD, in certain cases for depression, but it's a double-edged blade. A lot of people suffered it as a consequence. So I hope that, I hope really strongly for 3 things. One, as a scientist who essentially has my podcasting job because of the way the NIH supported me coming up through graduate school, postdoc, my lab, I think a 40% cut would be too severe. Regardless of the IDC issue, I think it's just too severe. It's going to kneecap science throughout the world and health, the growth of new discoveries throughout the world. I'd like to keep that funding level. I really would. What happens to IDC, what happens to Harvard and Columbia, separate matter within there. But then I would very much like a very thoughtful committee to go in and look at every single grant by area.
Yeah, you have to have a scalpel, not
you have to have a scalpel. And you could say, listen, in the field of neuroscience, am I the most qualified to decide what grants should be funded or not funded? No, but I can tell you that I sat on study section for a long time, and I can tell you there were clusters of grants that didn't solve what good labs call the deletion test. If this laboratory didn't exist, would it change the direction of science? You have to pass the deletion test. Sorry, not solve. You have to pass the deletion test. If you didn't exist, would it matter? And that's a harsh test. Nobody wants to be subject to that test. But anyone that's getting millions and millions of taxpayer dollars, and by the way, millions of taxpayer dollars often to work on and kill, and we could argue about I think most people are speciesists. They'd rather see a mouse or a rat life or a non-human primate life. But, we're killing animals. We're occupying the lives of graduate students and postdocs with taxpayer dollars. The work needs to be justified by passing the deletion test. And the idea that AI could, do that, maybe. But the idea that a jury of close peers are going to decide the deletion test, and if you pass, that's flawed in my opinion. Because the in culture, we don't have time for this, but the in culture of science is, people aren't like helping each other out just to help each other out. But when you're very close to something, it's very hard to make a really clear decision about it. And when you're too far from it, you're not qualified to. So we need people that are in the middle who can really go in and say, okay, in the field of let's say, visual repair and neuroscience, give me a scalpel. I hate to do it, but also, some are going to pass. And then I do think that instead of cutting people's funding entirely, there should be initiatives saying, hey, listen, if you want to run a laboratory, would you be interested in working on these important projects that maybe the Americans paying for this research ought to be able to upvote? Why not? I mean, it's 2025, and the NIH has done beautiful work over the last funded beautiful work over the last 100 years. But I think an update in the way these things are handled is great. As I say that, every single one of my colleagues is probably quaking that they're not going to pass the deletion test, except the ones that know they would absolutely pass the deletion test. And then the question is, who's making the decision? And I'm not saying I should be making that decision, although I have some strong opinions about what's great, what's meh, and what's like lousy. But I do think we need to be more discerning, the same way that a bunch of VCs would sit around and say, like, hey, what are we getting for this investment?
Well, yeah, I think the question they ask is, if we don't make this investment, is the world going to be, worse off? Like, does this company, I think it's not quite the same test, but I think it's important for investors to run that process and understand, are we really funding the future that we want, or is this kind of a rounding error and the dollars could be better elsewhere?
Can you give us a white pill? Like, are there any other organizations that can come in and help? I always think of what happened in computer science and artificial intelligence. Google created the transformer architecture, not patentable. It created large language models, and we got ChatGPT, and we got all this great stuff. It would be amazing if we could find a way that the big pharma companies that are big and profitable wind up stepping in and funding some of the gap. Maybe there's nonprofits. Maybe we just, the sheer will of the American people, we wind up voting for more funding. But how do we really make science amazing and ensure really strong progression over the next few decades?
Yeah, I mean, that's the key question, right? So, I mean, listen, I was born at Stanford Hospital. Did my training, much of it at Stanford. I'm gonna say I'll probably die at Stanford. Hopefully, I don't. In the hospital, I'd like to, die getting morning sunlight or something. But my dad's a physicist turned computer scientist, right? Sure. Worked at Xerox PARC, which was an incubator for ideas, right, for many years. So I grew up in that landscape, and he always said, eventually degrees in computer science will be important for starting companies, right? But when I was young, that wasn't the case, right? People dorked around on computers and made video games. And then we saw cell biology migrate into the world of biotech and for the treatment of certain diseases. It has been, we can't forget that there are certain basic discoveries, going back to our earlier discussion, that have led to tremendous treatments, like the drops to lower eye pressure in glaucoma. If you catch your eye pressure elevation early and you take those drops, you will keep your vision.
Wow.
Okay. Right, you'll keep your vision. So it's not like we can't cure glaucoma, but you have to. That's based on basic work. So the real key here is to ask, so where has it been done successfully before? It's been done successfully in the world of computer science and AI. Right, growing up, I heard about AI. It was kind of like no one took AI seriously growing up. Or brain-machine interface was like,
it was just sci-fi.
That was so sci-fi.
Seriously. Now my good friend from childhood, Eddie Cheng, who's the chair of neurosurgery at UCSF. I mean, he's using BMI, brain-machine interface, and AI to get people with locked-in syndrome to speak, and Elon's going to get them to move. I fully believe that Neuralink is going to solve paralysis. I really do. I'm not saying that because we're on X. I know the head neurosurgeon there. They're well on their way, right? Yeah. So the question is, when should it move into biotech? And, Peter Thiel had the Breakthrough Labs idea. He was paying people to not go pursue graduate degrees in labs to get the PI like me papers and advance their careers and then maybe go get their own lab, but to take great ideas and go through breakthrough labs. I don't know what happened to breakthrough labs, but I do think that incubators like that, where you have enough money to test, to move fast, right? Move fast, break things model, figure out whether or not something is promising, and then advance that. And here's the key. As soon as something looks promising, you want to be able to pour human power onto that. And the problem in academia is every graduate student and postdoc needs a first author paper in order to have the potential to get a job. And so one thing that I've been in Jay Bhattacharya's ear about is, I think the independent investigator model of science in this country, where it's the Huberman lab or it's the whatever lab named after the PI, I think that's a flawed model. This is going to really upset some people. There should be labs named after a particular mission, like curing blindness laboratory or solving Alzheimer's laboratory. And then people can collaborate within that lab without the idea that they're necessarily going to go start their own lab. In Europe, typically there's a lab head, and it's very hierarchical, but people who get PhDs often stay in those labs as permanent careers. They get paid better and better. The NIH has not had a mode to keep paying people as staff scientists. And most people don't want to go off and run their own lab. So I think the ability to iterate more quickly, much like a tech company, funded by NIH would be enormously beneficial. And I could be wrong, but I think it's going to be music to most people who would like to go to graduate school. Because what it means is that you can be on the bench next to someone and they get the thing that's really interesting. And rather than feel like, oh, shit, I got nothing, you can now start working together to accelerate the progress of that work. And so now who can go off and run a lab becomes a separate issue, but it really becomes discovery-based science. And we can't forget that the taxpayers are funding this, right? So this is like, as much as we'd all like the next generation of scientists to all have their own labs, I think what we really want is for the next generation of scientists to have the opportunity to make fundamental discoveries that seed health and cures and treatments for disease, right?
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, do we really care about the careers of scientists? No. That we care about treatments and cures for disease. The careerist model.
Well, I do think it matters that young people aspire to be scientists.
Yes.
And that is a concern that I have about the destruction of trust between the public and the science community via COVID. The concern is that you'll have a 10-year period, a decade where young people say, well, I'm not going to go into science because they have some, and I think that's the work that you do with Huberman Lab has potential to heal that divide between the public and the science community, and one of the reasons why I think it's so important.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, the three most gratifying things I can hear as feedback for the podcast are, I can't believe this is free. That feels good. That people are sleeping better. Like, oh goodness, I made a few morning sunlight and dim the lights and a few things in the evening, and like I'm sleeping better, because I know that catalyzes many, many other positive changes. And then the third one, and the one that's most heartening to me as a scientist, less as a health podcaster, is when people say, like, you really turned me on to like neuroscience, or or I'm going into the field of psychology, I want to be a therapist, but I'm really starting to incorporate some physiological tools with my patients. That to me those are the three most gratifying things. As you can probably tell, I'm very impassioned by this, right? Folks close to me know this is how I talk all the time. No, I haven't had any caffeine in the last 4 or 5 hours. Just kind of.
We have.
I do. I'm glad you love this stuff. All right.
We love it. We drink it every day.
We debated. We didn't have time, but I debated having you join the call, and it was just stacks of cans so that you couldn't even see us.
So I do 4 of these a morning minimum.
So good.
But I have a very high caffeine tolerance, and
fast metabolizer.
Fast metabolizer, and there are many issues I care deeply about, but what you just put your finger on is so key. If this 40%, I know people are like, don't give them this money. They fucked up during the pandemic, excuse my language, or they lied. Listen, these kids that would potentially become scientists, we can harness their energy. They didn't lie. They didn't do anything wrong. And if we train them properly and we put them into an environment where the spirit of that environment is just discovery-based, maybe a little less careerist, a little more discovery-based, and we really fund the most important work, we can really transform the treatment and cures for all these diseases that everyone is so concerned about. I know that because it's proved to be the case every single time. If you look at AIDS, there are 2 things that led to the treatments, and AIDS isn't fully cured, but it's a very different landscape now than in the 80s. Two things, right? Money and emotion. And it came emotion first and money, and then a bunch of scientists and labs and a bunch of funding. Okay. So the reason we don't have a cure for schizophrenia, even though it's 1% of the world's population, is sadly it tends to run in families. There's not a strong lobby for research on schizophrenia. The director of NIMH told me that, former director, Bob Desimone. The reason there's so much interest in autism is that any human being with half a heart looks at a kid, and I'm not talking about kids that are on the spectrum or a little neurodivergent who, I work with those people. Like, we're not talking about that. I'm talking about kids that have like stereotype motion, can't be in an open environment, will forever need support. I'm not trying to like split the spectrum, but there are kids on the spectrum that really struggle, right? And so the reason there's so much interest in finding treatments for things like that or for major depression is because many, many people suffer, right? And what's required is money and scientists working on the right problems and ditching the things that aren't promising. The faster you can iterate, the better. And so I do think the Silicon Valley model has something to offer. And I don't know what the latest update is on Breakthrough Labs and if Peter's moved on from that. I haven't heard much about it, but that doesn't mean that they don't have something interesting. But look, as you can tell,
the key is like if you have one car that comes out, it's not so great. You don't destroy the car industry. You know, you don't like basically dismantle the entire system. This car, hurt people, so we should just eliminate all cars.
Yeah, look, I think in engineering, we're on X after all. Like in engineering, more of an engineering stance on basic research is helpful. It's also true that I can name off countless discoveries in biology where an accident of leaving something, on the shelf too long or something led to an interesting discovery. I mean, there is some fortuitous aspect to it, but now with AI, you can also run lots of hypotheses in silico, more in vitro, then move to in vivo models. I mean, there is a way to make the money go further, but ultimately there's no replacement for great ideas, and there's no replacement for human energy. And the best source of human energy that I know is youth. And so you need to catch people when they're coming out of college, not send them to work in a lab for 3 years before they might go to graduate school, then realize that they can't make a good living compared to their friends in finance. Like, you're not going to get rich doing science, although some scientists do get rich, right? I mean, Genentech was started by scientists. I mean, there are companies, but ultimately you want to harness that energy of youth and the spirit of discovery and give people the resources. Now, I had wonderful mentors, and one of the most important things they taught me was you get money, you give it to young people, and you get the fuck out of their way and let them try. And then when they don't work, you guide them and you say, listen, like, you're wasting your time, move on. Like, no, and they get bound to it. No, move on. It's like a bad relationship, cut and run. And then you just start the next thing. And eventually you get hits. And then if you can pile human power onto those hits, right? I'm just describing what everyone knows to be true, but this is not the way that the system has been designed. It is old and clunky, and it doesn't need to be scraped or, hacked in half almost at a 40% cut, but it does need to be revised. It really does.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Well, this was fantastic.
I want to hit the gong for you. Can you give us a stat? How big is the Huberman Lab podcast now? Can you give us an idea of the scale of the impact you've had? We like to hit the gong when we hear big numbers.
He's looking over at Rob.
He's like, no, don't leak anything.
Even some rough numbers.
Just any number, maybe just one episode hit 1 million downloads. Give us some number, something to hit the gong.
Those are rookie numbers.
Those are rookie numbers.
Yeah. So, can I say one thing first?
Please, anything.
Rankings reflect acceleration, not absolute reach.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like Rogan, like when people go like, Rogan's reach is like beyond. I know the numbers. I'm not going to talk about his numbers, but it's an order of magnitude greater than all the other major news hubs combined.
Oh yeah.
It's unbelievable. We are very blessed to reach, 20 million people.
20 million people. Let's go. Let's hit the gong. Thank you so much for coming on.
This was an important conversation.
This is fantastic.
I'm excited for people to get into the entire episode.
Yes. Yeah, it's fantastic. It's over 4 hours long.
No, and
It
thank
is.
you.
So if nothing else, with the Huberman Lab podcast, I always say, if nothing else, I'll cure insomnia. But no, in all seriousness, it's timestamps so you can break it down. If you want to get right to the vaccine stuff, skip to that. Bounce
It's
around.
fantastic. I listened to it last night. It was great.
Podcasts can be digested however you want.
Yeah.
I want to say thanks to you guys. I started watching your show since you had Rob on.
Fantastic.
What you guys do is great. I also think that you're transforming the way that media is dispersed each week, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
You guys are on X doing what you do and elsewhere. So thanks so much.
We appreciate it. Yeah,
you
thank
guys
you so
are
much
both
for
welcome
stopping.
anytime.
Yeah,
This
anytime.
was
You have
really
news.
fun.
If you ever need more Matina, let us know.
Oh yeah, we can
got
always
a fridge
use
coming.
more.
We got a fridge. We're going to
coming.
park a fridge right here.
We're going to
'cause
do
we,
it. The guys, the whole crew back there is cheering.
Where are you
for
guys
Matina.
based? Just
We're in
remind-
Los Angeles, in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, we'll come
See
right
you
over.
soon. It's a nice
Yeah,
day.
we'll see you soon.
All right.
Thanks so
Cheers.
much for hopping on.
Awesome. You're the man. Cheers.
Bye. We are live from the Palace of Party Rounds. Oh my God. It's YC Demo Day. Welcome to our YC Demo Day stream.
That is
We have
insane.
Gary Tan joining us. Wow, you absolutely destroyed my laptop. Gary Tan, welcome to the stream.
There he is.
Here
What's
he
going
is.
on?
The president of Y Combinator, Gary Tan, good
Brothers.
to see you. Great to see you.
Always great to see y'all.
There's a line around the block still.
Yeah.
Is that right?
People
Yeah.
are pumped.
Oh my God, yeah.
It's absolutely slammed. Take us through, what are you seeing? How's this one going? What's actually changed? Because we're in a different location.
Yeah,
Not
we're
intentional.
literally
Break it all down.
in the middle of this is like our HQ.
Yeah.
This is we got the spring batch together. This is the first spring batch that
First
we've
one.
ever done.
So it's X25 now?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Paul Graham doesn't like X,
Okay,
so
what
we're
are we gonna
slowly
do?
replacing it with spring.
Spring? Okay.
Yeah.
There we go.
When you create a place like this, I think you
Yeah.
get to dictate little things like,
Sure.
not
Yeah.
liking X.
Yeah, he's a legend.
So we got to write out spring.
Okay.
But, I don't know. What do you think it should be? It could be P. Maybe if it's not X, it's pronto.
Well, do we have to go back
in
to like a
French.
mathematical notation for this stuff?
Maybe,
Bring in
yeah.
some like different, we have the Y Combinator algorithm.
That's
we need
right.
a different algorithm to define the different seasons.
I think
That's right.
just full word,
Full word,
winter, spring, summer,
25.
fall.
Yeah.
Summer, fall.
Well,
It's
I mean,
clean. It's
the
clean.
the energy from the founders is really electric. Honestly, it's insane.
Seems fantastic.
Like downstairs, we got the fun thing about hosting all of the investors in our house
Yep.
is that I got a whole "Whose house? Our house" chant downstairs. So we got
Give us an overview of we heard a little bit of your talk earlier, but give us kind of a breakdown of how you introduced today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, dude, it's like 90% AI. It's about 10%, 11% hard tech,
Okay.
which is awesome.
Yeah.
And then the really crazy stat is, how the last 4 batches, about the last year, the batch itself as a whole has been growing revenue by 10%. This time it's 12.
Wow.
There we go.
So we're actually inflecting up, and
amazing.
that's what you would expect. We're in the middle of the age of intelligence.
Yep.
6 months ago, 9 months ago, the models were 90 IQ. And, then they were 110. Now they're about 130.
Yeah.
We're sort of entering super intelligence zone.
Yeah.
And
4-digit IQ incoming.
yeah, that's right.
1,000. I don't even want to talk to that. But yeah, probably very valuable.
I thought Sam's essay yesterday was
Very
just
cool.
very prescient
I liked it
in
a
that
lot.
that's sort of the silver lining. Like everyone's sort of worried, what's going to happen to the jobs. Like to me, what's going to happen is the exact. It's actually an opening.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Like. The wild stat that we're seeing is actually the number of 18 to 22-year-olds applying to YC and getting it is up 110%.
Wow. Incredible.
Year on year,
People.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Is that driven by people liking to drop out of college or skipping college entirely? Is that because they're viewing college as kind of like, there was always a meme about like, what will you put YC in the education section of your LinkedIn?
Yeah.
Now it's like, oh wait, no, YC could actually be the replacement. Is that intentional?
Well, the
What do you
extreme
think about
meme
that?
here
Yeah.
that is interesting to think about. Like, I don't believe this,
Yeah,
but the memes among the 18 to 22-year-olds in particular is this might be the last time you can start businesses.
Oh, interesting.
Because once super intelligence hits, then the moats that the businesses that will exist will sort of ensconce like the 7 powers of the moats out there.
Sure. They're
and
just
then it'll
maximally efficient.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
they just
And so-
reach their terminal value immediately and maintain it forever.
So you're trying to get
Very,
network
very
effects. You're
fancy.
trying to build.
Yeah.
We're trying to get brand.
Yeah.
You're trying to get a cornered resource.
Sure.
And then the wildest thing here is that, this perfect. Someone was telling me yesterday. Right now, if you look at college grads, the rate of unemployment for CS grads is actually 2x that of art history majors.
That is crazy.
I have not looked this up yet.
Yeah,
so,
I heard that
Everybody's
too.
been quoting that. We've heard that too. We
Yeah,
talked about it.
there might just be something crazy going on with art history
It's
majors. They found
ChatGPT
some
hallucinating.
hack. They found some hack, and they're all getting employed. It's full employment for them. Very interesting. Question on the AI side. How are the companies feeling about the current battle between little tech and big tech? What we saw with WWDC, it feels like Apple's kind of retreating from some territory. We could be seeing more
And creating opportunities for developers.
For like mobile apps. We could see another mobile app boom because Apple's saying, hey, look, maybe we're not the company to build every single AI experience on the iPhone. We're seeing new hardware maybe come from OpenAI. There's
great.
different stuff going on with open source. What's the interplay between the average YC company and the Mag 7 right now?
Oh, I mean, the good thing is we still have, we have net neutrality.
Yeah.
So, and that thing we have 7 companies in the mega tech world.
Yep.
But you know what? Like anyone can just put something on the internet and they get distribution,
Yep.
right? So I think that the most important thing right now that I think all of us should really be considering is we need platform neutrality, right?
Yeah.
The second that today you open your Siri and you don't get to choose. Do I want Perplexity? Do I want Anthropic? Do I want ChatGPT on there?
Yeah.
No, like that. This is actually the next sort of unfolding that needs to happen.
Sure.
Like we actually need the platforms to allow other people to enter. But if we do that, we can actually have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of companies, each of which can get to $1 billion net revenue.
Yep. Totally.
And like you could do it probably with 10 people, right?
Yeah.
So if you link up these two super mega trends, like that's the future that we want to live in, right? Like you can be 18 to 22. You don't necessarily have to go in. Like the credential matters a lot less. You know what matters now? It matters. Your agency and your taste, right?
Yeah.
And you don't have to like go and get anyone's permission.
The nature of
for that.
LLMs, you could actually get a better tutor from an LLM than you could from at times working under somebody at some big company who would maybe explain, here's how you make a financial model for a software company. But now you could just talk enough with ChatGPT that you can probably figure it out even better than having like a mentor in some cases.
I want to ask about applying to YC. Have you noticed that the apps are becoming more GPT driven? Are people using AI to write their apps? Do you recommend against that? What do you think?
I mean, if anything, like I think the best apps, in the past we might say, oh, this is AI slop. I think because the models are now smart enough, like my writing process, for instance, has totally changed at this point. Like I am, you're actually able to come up with better ideas, I think.
Yeah, totally.
I would rather people actually prompt to get like all of the ideas out there. One of the things I've been using in ChatGPT lately is like, give me 10 options for different concepts or ideas that might fit here.
Yeah.
And then what I'm doing is I'm using my prompting to do that.
Yep.
And then on the back end, it'll give me like 10 things. 5 of them make no sense. 2 or 3 of them in my brain, I'm like, I didn't think about that. That actually is a useful thing that I can put in with these other concepts that are in my head.
Yeah.
And so I think it's actually, the computer is a bicycle for the mind. Like if you can prompt really, really well, using it you have to treat it like a vehicle, right?
Yeah.
It is not a destination of its own. It's actually, this is like the self-driving car for the mind.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, even just
or treat it like a
app
coworker.
review.
No, All that matters is the end output.
Yeah.
And if you're working on any type of project, not working with a smart collaborator is going to lead to a worse output.
Yeah,
and O3 Pro
condensing down these ideas, because I've read a lot of apps where it's like, wow, there's actually like some really incredible KPIs in here, but you buried it in paragraphs of exposition that were completely unnecessary. And I know that the people that are actually reviewing the YC apps are not going to read this far. And so just having it as a co-pilot seems like a really, really good.
How have you and the other group partners pushed to guide the batch around reporting on revenue, right? There's a lot of conversation around what is ARR? It's sort of this flexible definition. There's obviously a lot of pressure for every founder coming into demo day to like show results. How do you guys kind of guide founders
absolutely.
on reporting?
What we'd like people to do is put contracted ARR if it is, and then if it has an opt-out clause where people can sort of get out, they should just have a little star on it, and it's like opt out at 30 days or whatever. I think it is very, very important that founders are just don't engage in securities fraud. It's like kind of a basic thing, right? So I think that it is the amazing thing about the tech today is like the demos are so impressive that people are willing to take a big chance.
Big companies are willing to sign up for big deals.
Yeah.
And they obviously want some flexibility, but being really clear about that. I mean, these are non-GAAP metrics.
That's right.
You know, there is some gray area. But we need to define new metrics as we move forward.
Are you seeing companies able to pivot more times within a single batch and just iterate faster
kind of rewrite
to
the
get to better
entire code
outputs?
base?
Because historically, it wasn't unreasonable for a company to pivot a few times to get to something great, and maybe they only have 2 weeks at the end to really sprint and show progress.
Sure.
Now I could imagine certain companies like really pushing it. Have you seen that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, something like 30% of the companies change their idea during the batch, and that's actually great.
Yeah,
I mean,
of course, you discover
it means
something
that
as you're researching and building.
Yeah, and I think that that's always been true. I mean, some of the biggest companies end up being, literally pivots from like 2-3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And then I think that, people might say, oh, that, that kind of sucks, or, why is that? I mean, I think it's good news. The good news is like, you can just do things. The good news is like,
so when I think of the YC mantras, I think build something people want. Talk to your customers. Is you can just do things. The third that we're adding is that important to have that volition, that agency.
Yeah,
it's the distillation of agency, right?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it actually. I think the most important thing that I feel like everyone has to learn the hard way is to learn. The sound of your own voice. To say, not to get all bicameral mind about it, but that's sort of where we're at. Actually,
do it.
Well, no, I mean, if you read, PG's old essays, like one of the things that really jumps out at me is like to what degree, your childhood, your schooling. Like he has so many essays about, what high school is like, being a nerd, moment. Like all these things are like, really spoke to me, and that. The process of becoming actually a founder is actually a journey inward to actually learn the sound of your own voice, that like you can make your own way, you can have agency, just because, I mean, actually by definition, the startups that create new categories require a level of courage that like people have to find within themselves. Actually, you have to say, actually, you know what? Like, I know the Wall Street Journal says that, and the hater decel journalists say this, and all this stuff. You have to actually separate yourself from the default view of how the world works, and then you're actually trying to divine secret knowledge by going into the markets, going to talk to people that have never. Even touched ChatGPT yet, right? Like they don't know it's like that meme where you're in, you're the tech guy like in the corner. And then like everyone's dancing and they just don't know. They don't like that's where we're at still. Like it won't be like that for another year or two. But like for now, that's still true. You go into any business in the world, they don't know this revolution is about to happen to them.
Crazy.
And we get to create it.
Like last demo day, we talked to a company that was doing AI voice interactions to help the elderly process Medicare receipts, essentially. And they discovered that the elderly were talking to their chatbots for like 3 hours. And that's just something that like you might be able to predict intuitively, but I thought it was just a very funny like discovery that only happens from actually trying to build in that market with the latest and greatest technology. And that's what I love about YC Demo Day.
What's your latest thinking on batch sizes? Are we staying, where we're at?
The high level is like we want as much prosperity in the world as possible. Brian Chesky's on my board. Paul Graham and Jessica Livingston, Karen Levy. The board has given me my directives. It's, what we need to... This is the tree of prosperity. Let's have the tree of prosperity grow. But I think that YC fundamentally is the managed marketplace. You look at an Airbnb. I'm still bullish on Airbnb, and that you look at the amount of space in the world. The amount of space that has been listed on Airbnb is still a tiny fraction of what it could be. And what does that unlock? And it unlocks new experiences, travel like a human, like all these things. It's a $100 billion company from nothing. And I think that the same thing is about to happen to innovation and venture, but we have to do it thoughtfully, right? Like, we're at Demo Day here. We have more than 1,000 of the top investors in the world all congregated here, right?
Wow,
we have 1,000 people in this building.
That's amazing.
And
incredible.
We need to grow them thoughtfully. Like we need, what I need YC to continue to provide returns, right? And can't comment on, the rumors about scale this week, but like we need a lot more things like that, and we're getting it. This is sort of uniquely the community where that happens.
Talk to us about the 2 new partners that were added to the YC partnership.
Oh yeah, there's 3 actually.
Oh, 3?
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry,
Wow.
2. Yeah, Andrew Miklas and John Shu actually.
Okay, cool.
Sorry,
what about
I almost
Tyler?
announced. No, yeah, Tyler too.
Okay.
Yeah, that's Tyler too.
Got it.
I mean, all of them created companies that exited for hundreds of millions to PagerDuty as a public company.
Wow.
North of $1 billion.
That's remarkable.
Those are exactly the kind of partners that we want at YC.
great.
It's like they've been there and they've done that.
So roughly how big is the partnership now?
It's 15 partners
15
total.
partners.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you can still keep the actual group sizes fairly small within the batch.
I mean, that's the main. You can just basically guess at what the batch size will be because each partner can do 10 to 25 companies, depending on how hard they want to work. But I don't think it's a numbers game. I think it's we want to fund all the really, really good founders. And I feel a little bit embarrassed about, we're accepting companies at a 0.8% rate right now.
Wow.
Right. And so, I think that we're behind the 8 ball, actually.
Sure.
Like, I feel really good about this.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to keep growing what we got here.
Yeah.
But I also need to grow the partnership, and then we need to fund better and better companies.
Yep.
And then, this is a 10, 20, 50, 100-year thing. Like, we're trying to build Y Combinator into a multi-100-year institution.
It
and
belongs. We need it.
Have you had any companies go through this batch and decide not to raise additional capital at this point because they're just making so much revenue that they have no need for it?
Famously, Tom funded Axiom last batch.
Yeah.
And
they're doing hundreds of
millions of dollars in pure profit. So
I saw that and I was like trying to look back through our stream and like, did we have them
crypto's
on?
wild, man.
Yeah, it's a wild west. It's a wild west.
That is insane.
Yeah.
Well, we'll let you get back to it. Thank you so much for coming on the stream.
Thanks
Gary.
for having me.
As always,
It's
fantastic.
an honor.
Welcome to the stream. I'm John. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. I'm John. How are you doing?
Or die season 2 soon?
Everyone died.
Everyone died. You didn't hear the story about PMF or Die? They died.
They died. Yeah. It happens sometimes.
Never lock yourself in a room for the 90 days.
No, live stream
move to
never.
sunny San Francisco. Do YC. That's my recommendation.
Basically the same thing.
From here on out.
So
Anyway, please introduce yourselves and the company.
Yeah, I'm Tom.
I'm Eric. Yeah,
Eric,
You
nice to meet you.
you guys look. You're not related
guys
at all,
meet?
right?
We're not related.
You could go by brothers. People ask us. People ask us. Are you guys
people
brothers?
always ask us,
But,
brothers. What does the company do?
We're doing agentic people search. So we have a people database of around 200 million people. And
Interesting.
we use agentic search to search over that for companies and businesses to do like sales, recruiting, GTM. And
So are we talking about specifically like I am a recruiter and I need a salesperson and I'm going to go to you to try and hire them?
No. So basically, like you can put in a criteria. Like essentially, what we do is
hold the microphone up.
Here, push the microphone a little bit closer to you.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, essentially, what we do is we like deploy an LLM, assign every profile to that LLM, and then given your criteria, that could be like 1 paragraph long. We just ask the LLM if this profile like meets that criteria, and then we built like a load distributor to run like 10,000 LLM calls in parallel.
Wow.
Do that at scale. We can search over like 5 million profiles in like 30 minutes. And then,
insane.
So walk me through one of the key examples. I'm sure this is live. You have customers. What's an example of someone using this?
So, for example,
production?
we had a query come in yesterday. Actually, it was just like every founder that was acquired, that was the CTO of their startup, was acquired by Databricks or Snowflake in the last 3 years, and they still work there. And then there's only probably like 25 people in the world that fits that profile, and we found all 25 of them just by because we can use and have an LLM going, just because we have we can throw as much compute at the problem as we want.
Interesting.
And then the LLMs get better the more compute you throw at it.
It's interesting to be able to find. You're able to find information that is historically effectively impossible to find without doing all the work that you guys did ahead of time.
Makes a ton of sense. Yeah. So what buyer or what buyer archetype within an enterprise or business is most excited to buy your product?
Yeah, I mean, like mega recruiters by far.
Recruiting firms?
No, just like people that,
Hyperscaler.
Or like a big recruiter at Meta,
we work with Mercor right now, for example.
Oh, Mercor, okay, cool.
So, just like people hunting for talent, but it's like a generalized type skill, right? So for example,
Yeah.
you know, like an AI Lab's training a new voice model and they need like people that speak Cantonese. Sure. So then it's like, okay, like find me every Cantonese speaker in the US that has like a podcast presence.
Yeah.
And then like, okay, great, these guys can come train our voice models, right? Like that's kind of
Or they might even need someone who speaks Cantonese and also is an expert in biology.
Yeah,
So they can talk about the biology terms.
Yeah.
And that's something that, how are you going to search for that on LinkedIn?
It's so funny because I run these type of queries in my own head where I'm
All the
like, we
time.
need a videographer who's in LA that has experience in film, but you know,
I mean, like,
but it's also part of Teapot. That's basically what we need oftentimes. Like has a sense of humor. It's like, how would you even know that? Well, if you look through their posts, I'm sure you could figure that out.
I mean, it's basically like as close as you can. If you just give like a criteria to human recruiter.
Totally.
So you can imagine like 5,000 human recruiters just like manually looking over profiles and then, you know.
Okay, business model. Are you most recruiting firms? They charge on like a per fee basis, $30,000 to place an engineer somewhere. Are you doing like a seat-based pricing, consumption-based pricing? This sounds expensive if you're talking about running 20 million LLM queries at the same time.
It's actually not as expensive as people think because you know, open source models have gotten so good.
Okay.
Yeah. Like I'm guessing like, you know, any like deep research query costs us like $10 maybe.
Okay.
But then you know, like we charge for conversion with our B2B customers.
Conversion. Okay.
Yeah, we charge by conversion for B2B customers.
So that's probably pretty expensive, which is great.
Yeah. And also we have like a platform that's just available to everybody, so they can pay us a subscription fee, search as much as they want.
Very cool.
And then do email enrichment phone number.
I feel like we could use this. This is we might be potential customers.
Yeah, we need a guest that doesn't hate tech that can talk about this. How did you two meet? What were you doing before YC?
Yeah, so we met in elementary school actually. So we were originally from Canada.
Let's go.
We met in elementary school, and we became close friends. Yeah, it's been great here. But we became close friends when Eric he uninstalled Windows on my computer.
Nice.
And I was really pissed at him for a day, and then we fixed it. So then we became great friends after that.
That's how great
friendship
You just couldn't load anything?
Yeah, like,
you didn't
I
even
had
install
homework
Linux
due
for
that
you?
night. I had homework. It was during school, and then
ultimate prank: uninstall Windows on your best friend's computer.
Boys being boys.
And then we spent one semester at college each. So I was at Penn, he was at UC San Diego, and then come January we were both like why are we even there?
Let's drop out.
Wait, so you guys 18, 19?
We're both 18 right now. Yeah.
Wow.
Let's go.
Here we go.
Came down
That's
to
amazing.
What's the youngest team that you've met here besides yourselves?
17. There is
17.
a high school senior.
Okay.
I didn't know when I was in there.
Okay,
I'm doing some robotics.
It is getting younger.
Yeah, we have a bottle of wine here. We're gonna give it to you.
The youngest.
We received one from.
Hopefully, you're not going back through YC in 3 years. Hopefully, you're at the NASDAQ or something.
Talk to me about traction, metrics, anything that you're sharing here at Demo Day, anything to get the venture capitalists excited.
Yeah, 270 paying customers.
Wow.
First version of the. So I don't know if you guys heard about Linked.
Linked? No.
Yeah. All right. So a very early version of this product we launched, which is like Rank Stanford, like Stanford Rank.
Okay.
Which was we basically built this. We basically scraped the entire alumni database ofStanford.
I'm sure they love that.
Yeah, they were okay with it. We put it online, and then we had this app where people can like see two random alumni put next to each other, and then you vote for who's more cracked.
Who's more cracked?
And that version of the app picked up like 80,000 users. Was how we got into YC and stuff.
Very cool. Very cool.
And then you know we came down here, 207 paying customers, about 16,000 monthly recurring revenue.
That's great.
Since 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Profitable. Yeah. No, but,
wow. Is the team just you two right now?
So there's 3 of us.
Three of you.
We were two co-founders, our founding engineers from high school.
Cool.
He just graduated.
Same high school.
Yeah, we all went to the same high school.
That's amazing.
Okay.
Else?
No, I'm super excited for you guys.
Congratulations on YC.
We're gonna get on the product, and I actually have a bunch of people to send this to.
Yeah, this is fantastic.
Yeah, you should give it a try.
Thank you so much.
We'll talk to you soon.
Awesome, guys.
Great meeting you guys.
So we were trying to make this happen for the last week.
Amazing.
But he just announced his Series A today, 17 million, right?
17 million.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
There we go.
Well, I mean, we have stuff to celebrate.
I already got the hat.
Yeah,
so
I got the
There we
hat.
go.
Hey! Congratulations.
Seems like you've done that a couple times.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. But this is the biggest round of the day.
This is the biggest round.
All right.
Who did the round? How far along are you? How big is the company? Give me some stats.
Yeah, okay. So 8VC did the. By the way,
cool.
guys, this is awesome. I did like the interview with VentureBeat, and I'm way more starstruck by this. So like, I'm not just saying that, but
amazing.
I'm like, all right.
Thank you.
So 8VC led the round.
Let's go. Let's go.
Joe
What
Lonsdale,
partner?
absolute dog.
What partner are you working with?
Jack Moshkovitz.
Nice.
cool.
He's great.
Awesome.
He is fantastic. Yeah. So how far along? So we're.
And were you in the last batch?
We were a couple batches ago. We were summer 23.
Cool.
Great vintage.
Was that still remote,
excellent vintage.
or was that back?
No,
in
we were
person?
the first back.
Back.
We were,
There you go.
we had an advantage.
Very
in that.
nice.
But yeah, so Outset does AI moderated research.
Okay.
So what does that mean? It's like when big companies have to do a ton of research, like Nestle has to go figure out whether they should launch this weird version of DiGiorno pizza or something.
Sure.
They go do research.
Yep.
So either they're running massive surveys and they're getting like very low fidelity data. They don't really know much. It's just a bunch of numbers. Or they're running interviews, and that's where it's a one-on-one interview with everybody, right? Which is not actually cost effective. So,
totally.
So now you can run AI-led interviews. And that means AI is leading the conversation, digging in, following up, probing deeper, and synthesizing all of that for you.
Got it.
And we work
How
with,
big is that? How big is the legacy market in that space?
So the research market is like 140 billion. It's actually a really big one.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's like huge companies that you probably may have never heard, like Ipsos and Kantar and like these like big guys that are just kind of sitting there. So there's a lot of opportunity. And we work with like Microsoft, Nestle, Weight Watchers. So we've been super enterprise focused, and we're a couple years in.
What are the interaction patterns that you like or you think are kind of unlocked by AI? I imagine that voice phone calls is top of mind versus like forums, which was always like available and already computerized essentially.
It's actually, I think the cooler thing is what you can get from participants and synthesize. So it's like, so now we do video interviews and they do audio, and they can even share their screen.
Yeah.
Right. So like all of that is being ingested.
Interesting.
And then like people ask like, does AI have an avatar when it's interviewing? And we actually did research, and people don't want that.
They don't want the avatar.
No, they don't want the avatar.
Yeah, that was
the avatar
obvious.
is something like weird, uncanny valley stuff where I'm like, and you're just like
people
random.
are used to phone calls.
People used to phone calls, and they're fine sharing their video. But like, if you suddenly see an AI, you're like, I'm trying to make $15 doing some research.
Totally.
Like, you like suddenly see that, you're gonna be all weirded out. So it's actually
Black
much
Mirror,
better to have AI come through with voice and text.
Yep. Talk to me about recruiting. You said $15. That's enough to get someone to jump on, but how do they even find out that $15 is on the table?
Yeah, so we partner with a number of different like companies that do nothing but panels, like nothing but
recruiting.
Nothing but recruiting. So you have like user interviews and Prolific, or
and
like
they
big
probably
partners.
get some demographics and some basics.
They get all that, and they have millions of people that are like ready to. It's like gig work, right? And so they
say,
connect.
okay, I need 100,000 people that drink energy drinks to give me feedback.
Exactly. And
What?
you can do all that through our platform.
Is there a certain unlock when an AI doesn't need to if a human is scheduling research calls, you can imagine they do like 4 30-minute blocks, and then they take a little break and they do some more or something like that. I don't know how it works, but an AI could hypothetically talk for hours and hours and hours and hours, like kind of
100%. So there's like, I think a lot of AI stuff is like, oh, where can it replace the human thing, and now it's cheaper. But actually, like this is taking on the stuff that like humans can't physically do. We only have 24 hours in a day, and so it happens that people use it to like interview 500 people, right, in a day or two, and that's like it's literally not possible. It's like just the laws of physics don't allow it. And so they're able to do that. They can do multilingual. They can kind of do it all at once. So you can wind up like unlocking actual like stuff you've never heard. Can I curse on this?
We usually don't, but
all right,
you're free to do it.
Stuff that they like would not have uncovered anywhere else. And they actually are able to get that like in this way.
Yeah.
What's your stack under the hood? What models are you using, getting the most value out of?
Yeah, we're using a combination. So it's it's like we're hitting multiple models constantly, but Azure, we're using a lot of Azure actually. So OpenAI models under the hood through Azure.
Yeah.
And it's
cool. Is their model router helpful? I saw they announced that at Build. I haven't talked to anyone that's actually used it.
I don't know yet.
Okay.
I don't think we played with that yet.
It out,
so basically, like what we need is just an incredible amount of reliability, because what we'll have is like 3 customers are all running like 500 simultaneous interviews.
Sure.
So we have to actually scale very, very quickly. And also like a lot of our customers, like the Nestle's of the world, like they care a lot about like super safe, super reliable. So we kind of like wind up needing the kind of Azure.
Yeah, and then you're also probably going through like peak LLM usage hours too, because you're not doing it in the middle of the night.
No, we can't just like process it on our own time. It like has to happen in that moment. But then we also fall back to OpenAI. We use Gemini for stuff. So we're like hitting a lot.
Yeah, talk about the is the voice modality beyond the uncanny valley at this point? Is that why voice is valuable? Are you using voice a lot? Because you could imagine that this might have been possible via text interactions. You're texting your responses back and forth. Probably get more out of a voice interaction. Are we just if we talk to you again in like 2 years, do you think it'll be like, okay, yeah, now I'm a believer in the avatar thing because it is photoreal?
Okay, so two things. So one, right now, what matters most is obviously the modality of the participant. Like if you think about like all we care about is the most deep, thoughtful, in-depth data that we can like pull from you. The response.
Yeah,
so that matters
and that's
way more.
Way better than text.
And that's way better than text. Our first product that we
gotta get them talking.
Yeah, our first like pilot with Weight Watchers back in 2023 was like all text, and it was actually pretty good, but like it's nothing compared to what people actually say.
Sure.
Yeah. And so that's what matters most is like video screen share, voice from the participants. From AI, so we use voice a lot. So there's a voice-to-voice mode where there's like no buttons, it's just conversation, and like people like it, but like not as much. And I think there's still just, if it's not a person, then it's still got the minor imperfections, the kind of slight bits of latency. And so I do think in 2 years we'll talk more about that. But ultimately, like people know it's a computer, like they know it's AI. And like they're kind of cool about it. Like we've done a bunch of this research. We're like, do you care that it's AI? They're like, no, like I get it.
Yeah.
Right. In fact, they like have even expressed that like they'll share more because there isn't a person.
Sure.
It's this idea of like social desirability bias. You're like, I don't want to come off as a person that is X, Y, and Z to another human.
To the robot. I will just tell you, look, I want this to be faster. Or I want this to taste better.
Or like the real reason I'm not using your product is this. I'm not going to say that to a PM or a researcher who's like at the company. Right, but instead you'll tell the real truth. And that was like our initial pilot with Weight Watchers was all about weight loss. And like that was like a thing people don't want to share a lot about. But with AI, they like shared everything about their life story.
I mean, it sounds like you've done you've worked with really big companies and that's where the money is. But when you went through YC, or if you're here, there's a big theme of talk to your customers. Has there been any pull at the lower end of the market?
It's funny. I sometimes you get a founder reaching out like, I really want to use this because I don't want to talk to my customers. Normally like talk to your customers.
We don't want you as a customer if you don't want to.
Exactly. There's basically I think a good reason not to use an AI moderator is like if you could sell to that person.
Exactly.
Probably don't outsource that, right? Like maybe to build the relationship yourself. The truth is, especially all the B2B stuff, there's not as much. We usually turn around and say, come back when you're like a couple hundred people, and like you're kind of scaling that out. But with some consumer stuff where you really have millions of people you're trying to learn from, it can make a ton of sense.
Talk to me about the data processing and the intelligibility that goes into once you have all that data. It's very nice to be like, hey, we have
we
5,000 hours of video.
Yeah, we prepared a 200-page report.
But nobody reads that. So how are you thinking about actually compressing it down? Because that seems uniquely suitable for AI. There's still a lot of art in terms of a lot of people say, oh yeah, I did a deep research report, and then the next query was, give me 10 bullet points about that, because I didn't actually want the full report.
So all right, so our vision here is we are building the deep research, but for primary research. So you think about deep research is all right, all desk research is now commoditized. So what if you just ask a question, you just want to learn from real people that's much more up to date, that whatever, your own proprietary data, it should be the same kind of idea, right? End-to-end agents are doing that. But today, the premise of AI kind of scaling your qualitative research is you also have to help them do something with all that conversational data, right? Because otherwise you're left with just hours and hours of transcripts, and I'm not going to review that. Right?
The application of this is, I know this is not what you're focusing on, but if I was a VC that wanted to write a multi-$100 million growth check, being able to get live interviews with 500 customers.
I mean, people already do this with GLG and
that's right. No, this is a huge opportunity actually. I have a whole side thought. I think one of the challenges there is with the expert networks is all about finding the right people. But if you're in a situation where you can find the right people and you can find 100 of the right people.
Well, we just had Plato AI on. You should talk to them. They're in this batch. They do LLM-based people search, so you can find every person that at Databricks that was a former founder.
There is an opportunity to connect all of that through that. But what I was going to say with the synthesis is what we do is basically taking all the video stuff and then we process it and we give you basically reports. But it's not just here's what it's telling you, deep research style. But what you can do is start slicing and dicing it. You can we quantify it. We give you breakdowns. We build highlight reels for you, and then people can cut it and segment it. And so it's a whole analytics suite on top of qualitative data, which is not a thing that has ever been done.
Because what were you doing? What were you doing before this?
So before this, I was a VP of product at TripleByte. If you know them.
Harsh Tagar.
Yeah, Harsh hired me.
partner.
Yeah,
No way,
exactly. He anyway, so I worked at TripleByte at Jumpstart, another company. So I was like leading product and design teams. But earlier in my career, I was a consultant where I was doing like this work nonstop. Where I was like,
are you a nominative determinism guy?
Yeah,
Is
he's
Aaron
looking for the
Cannon?
capital
You're an absolute cannon.
to fire $1 billion into research.
I have not capitalized on that.
I was looking at that too.
We're big.
We're big into the names or the truth. The names are the truth.
I like that.
Yeah, it works well for you.
I have a friend who always calls me the loose cannon. Like,
that's great.
It's like you can never know what to expect.
Cannon,
you know?
That's a little bit too much. Dial it in the capital cannon.
Exactly.
He's like, you can trust him with your capital. Just give it to him and fire it in the capital cannon, and boom.
Yeah, I'm gonna pivot off of loose cannon onto capital cannon. Yeah,
Aaron Capital Cannon. There you go. Anyway, this has been fantastic.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for hopping on.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
We'll have you back on sometime.
Can you introduce yourselves?
Yeah, I'm Cinnamon. I'm a mechanical engineer by background.
Cool.
Built hardware for Apple, Google, Slack.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hardware? Hardware for Slack.
Well,
Yeah.
what do they have?
RF X-Way the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center.
Oh, that.
Not SLAC. Not SLACK.
Okay, that makes more sense. I was like, what hardware device did I miss?
Good clarify.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah. So I'm Abhijit. I worked as a researcher at Stanford, a researcher at Harvard. I was like an intern at Intel.
Cool.
Built a lot of stuff, I guess.
Can you pull up on the mic a little bit more?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then tell us what your company does.
Yeah, so we're Godella. We're building a frontier physics model for mechanical engineers.
Okay.
So currently, AI models can't handle physics accurately because a lot of them are language-based.
Yes.
Ours are different. Ours are built to handle physics accurately, which means it can be used as a faster, cheaper replacement to simulations and physical prototypes.
Okay.
This is something that I think a lot of labs like to promise, right? Solving,
It was
they like to bring up,
they like to bring
up this idea of solving these problems in physics.
So walk me through. It sounds like you're actually training a model. Is it all reinforcement learning with verifiable rewards, or are you generating a whole bunch of training data? Is there a human data labeling component? Like, what is the pipeline to create what you're creating?
So at a core, we extract embedded physics from data, and that makes it generalizable.
Okay.
Did you want to share more about that?
So we don't use reinforcement learning or anything. It's basically like this sort of like, encoding framework, like where we actually like take the mesh itself. Like we work with meshes, right? Because we're like in simulation and stuff. So we take the fluid mesh and then we like encode it into like this low dimensional space, and that allows you to like learn the actual physics of the system.
Interesting.
And this allows, and when you do like symbolic regression on like the latent space, you get like a lot of, you get a lot more generalizability than you'd get with like regular models.
Okay.
So,
When did you guys start working on this? Did you bring it into YC, or did you pivot to this at some point?
We brought it into YC. So we were TAing a computational mechanics class together at Stanford, which was teaching undergrads in mechanical engineering how to use the traditional simulation software.
Yes.
Kind of bred a hatred for those softwares. Meanwhile, Abhijit's doing insane research at Stanford to use ML to model the physical world in these crazy accurate ways. He's like building ML models for Intel that are replacing months of trial and error in their plasma etch process. And I realized, like, hey, there's this huge opportunity to out with these old simulators. Let's bring physics-informed ML to the broader group of engineers who could really benefit from these faster, cheaper answers.
Okay. Try and make it a little bit more concrete for me. I'm familiar with like CFD, computational fluid dynamics. I have an engine and I'm trying to simulate how the air will flow over the jet that I'm building. Is that an example that we could use to kind of build off of? Is it just faster inference than calculating everything deterministically? Is that the goal?
Yeah, absolutely. Like all of simulation. Every time you start with a simulation tool, the engineer is starting with a question, right? You've got a question in your 3D model. You want to know what is drag
on
my, exactly. How's that going to change as I change thickness or angle of attack of my airfoil? Now imagine instead of needing to learn a simulation software, you can ask with natural language, drop in your CAD, and get simulation quality results instantly.
Interesting.
And we say instantly, it's 4,500 times faster than a benchmarked GPU accelerated solver that we tested against.
Wow. Okay, very cool. What's the go-to-market like? I mean, I imagine you're selling to like very large aerospace defense companies, or who else is building stuff? I mean, Apple, Google, these companies could buy this?
Yeah, exactly. I think the huge benefit of physics-informed ML is we can tackle problems that traditional simulators cannot tackle, multi-physics, multi-scale. Make it extremely feasible to tackle those problems, and we can also fill in the gaps where your idealized equations don't suffice to capture the complexity of the problem. So these problems that Apple, Google, maybe aerospace are throwing millions at in terms of R&D and building and testing, we can give you accurate physics models that can replace your need to physically build and test a product. So.
And they can probably like reality check your faster results with the traditional system that they have in place whenever they need to.
Yeah, and build that confidence in the
run
product.
that overnight instead of while they're live designing.
Traction, selling it so far.
It's been great. So we launched 2 weeks ago. We entered a $25K a year contract with an engineering firm to replace Ansys, which is a $30 billion incumbent.
Wow.
However, I think our stronger pull right now is we have some exciting opportunities with enterprise customers to, again, tackle those highest value problems where there is no solution for. For modeling something like drop simulation, right? Like there is no great simulator that gives you that fast, accurate answers, even though it's, governed by
simulation software gets like 70% accuracy or something.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's also very slow though. It's like 2 weeks to compute a drop simulation on a 14-inch MacBook Pro today. So like these really high value problems for enterprise customers, we have the opportunity to go apply our software and give them more accurate answers.
Very cool. How big is the team? Where are you going next? How's the fundraise going?
Yeah, it's 3 core, 1 advisor. The fundraise is going well. We're just about... Well, it's very exciting. We're just
yeah.
Amazing.
It's very busy.
Whoever's like bidding, I'm sure they're going to watch this. So.
Well, congratulations on a fantastic demo day. We've been giving out hats to
you.
folks who come on the stream. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Nice to meet you guys.
Great to meet you guys. Congratulations.
Can you introduce yourselves? What are you building?
Sure. So we're Morpho AI. We're building a software tool for engineers that are building new robots and new machines.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So I came from the manufacturing tech world.
Okay.
We both met at Harvard. I was an MBA.
Cool.
He was a postdoc, and you should talk about yourself too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I met her when I was at Harvard. Like she said, we got an introduction from a mutual mentor. I did my PhD at MIT, focused on automating the design of robots. So it seemed like wanted to bring that into some sort of product, show people in the world how useful it was and how it could change the way people design. And she was super excited about changing all the pain points in manufacturing. So we're doing this.
What is exciting in terms of robotics in manufacturing? There's a lot of noise about humanoids, but we talked to a lot of people who are just saying
robotics in manufacturing, or is it a tool to accelerate the manufacturing of robots?
Second one.
Yes, the second one.
But the main beachhead market is really in industrial robots.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we were both right. Of what those look like.
Yeah. So the crazy stat that we found is, if you're actually buying a robot off the shelf, you can't actually just put it in the factory floor. Like 90+% go through a customization process.
Wow.
So that's like 6 months of lead time, and it takes up a lot of engineering hours. So one of our customers, they were trying to build a full new industrial robot arm. 6 months gone in, arms not lifting. They came to us, and in 2 days we basically redid their entire hardware design.
Interesting.
So quite literally, we're allowing engineers to build new robots overnight is the hope, and in the future, in a matter of minutes.
How concentrated is the robotic arm market? Are there just a few companies that you really need to integrate with deeply, or do you need to create something more generalizable out of the gate?
So we're starting out with a little bit more of the OEM side of things, but also these integrators that are buying these arms and saying, I now need a new hand. So out of like the 50,000 robots that get deployed in a given year, most of them have a new hand that's made. And so now you have a generalist engineer trying to make a new hand for 4 to 6 weeks in a new design. So really plugging in that early stage of what do I build before we even get to the programming part of it.
Yeah, the whole idea is you just have to input the task specifications that you need it to solve, and then as much as possible, we're automating of the mechanical and somewhat the control design side of things.
Is there a lot of data that you need to feed in? Is there a lot of data that you need to pull from the manufacturer before you can?
We work with parts that manufacturers have and that they like to work with. And aside from that, it's task specifications, but we, unlike a lot of the Gen AI companies out there, we do employ some Gen AI solutions, but they're all trained from simulation and not from data sets.
Interesting.
And that's really important because the data for how do you go from design to how well it's going to work, that doesn't really exist. Nobody takes logs and curates data sets of things they've built and how well they worked.
Sure.
Talk about traction. Sounds like you guys already are in market.
Yeah, so we actually just got a grant from the UK government, £2.5 million British pounds, the last couple of months ago.
Non-dilutive?
Fully non-dilutive.
Congratulations, we love it for that. Jordy.
Oh my God, my ears.
It's going to happen.
That's less loud in here than out there.
Non-dilutive funding from Europe just shooting themselves in the foot.
Not getting on the captain.
They're going to be like, why didn't we get equity?
At least like a quarter point or something. Anyway, congratulations.
Thank you. None of us are British, but they basically have this.
Well, we're setting up an office in London. Like we're really excited about working with them and setting up an office.
Of course, there's benefits to the research community.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We have a lot of collaborators there as well.
It's fantastic. That's great.
it'll be an amazing outcome for them. Last thing, bull bear on humanoids.
Yes, humanoids. What's your take?
I'm bear, but like medium bear. I don't know. It was like, okay, if you're going to build a humanoid, which humanoid? Like people come in all sorts of sizes and shapes. A construction worker is not the same as like a toddler or something like that. Okay, not a toddler, but like ballerina, exactly.
Right? Linebacker looks different than a
So you're going to need custom designs regardless of what you do. But I mean, the other side of things is just like, what is the application right now of the humanoids that isn't solved better by re-engineering the things around the humanoid? That's there's a long tail there. So we hope we can help people to design the humanoids of the future. Just don't think it's here yet.
I
think there's
you're not saying bearish in a 100-year timeline. You're
or
saying
even maybe a
like
10-year time.
timeline.
I just think it's a little.
I completely agree. Very reasonable stance.
Awesome.
Anyway,
All right,
congratulations. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to give you a salute so we don't have to deal with the whole.
Or we could do like an air fist like it was COVID. Oh, okay, perfect.
Anyway. Who are you guys? What are you guys building? And please, microphone as close to your face as possible.
Yeah, I'm Daniel.
Cool.
And this is Musa.
Cool.
And we're the co-founders of VibeGrade.
What do you guys do?
So we help teachers save time grading papers directly in their existing learning management system.
What's the response been like? Do the teachers love it?
Yeah, actually all of our customers are paying out of pocket right
Really?
now.
Wow. Okay, interesting. You said in their LMS?
Yes.
So who are you plugging into? Who's the most dominant platform providers right now?
So the main one, the best integration is on Google Classroom.
Oh, interesting.
So a lot of K-12.
Is Blackboard not a thing anymore?
Not that much.
Oh,
there's some teachers.
We got a request for it, but most teachers are on Google Docs and Canvas.
Sure.
So like most K-12, which we serve, are on Google Docs and Classroom. We have Toddle as well, but it's mainly those few.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but for universities, they like Canvas is great. Like they can, it'll go and highlight like actual sections.
So can you add that on as like one of those like if I'm in Google Docs, I can do an add-on.
It's a Chrome extension.
It's a Chrome extension.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we realized that teachers they don't want to have to learn a new tool and go to a new platform to do that.
Okay.
So we built an integration that works directly with Google Docs. And directly with Canvas. So it's easy as clicking a button. And then we open up a window inside Google Docs.
Yeah. So walk me through the typical like workflow homework. I assume it's like the student uses the teacher uses ChatGPT to write the questions. The student uses ChatGPT to write the answers, and then the teacher goes back and uses ChatGPT to grade.
You guys grade it.
You guys grade it. But what's the actual workflow?
No human in the loop at all.
Are students sending Google Docs links to their teachers when they're done?
So Daniel was just in high school, so he really knows how this works.
Oh,
Are you a high school dropout?
You dropped out of high school. Get the bottle of wine. No, we're not good. Congratulations.
High school dropout.
So the
absolute Chad. You
teachers
front ran everybody that was like coming into demo day.
I dropped out of college. It's like that's so played out.
You had to one up.
Had to go farther.
Yeah, I mean,
so
like,
you're selling. I think we heard about you earlier. You're selling it back to your teachers now, like that you at the school you dropped out of.
Sort of. I mean, they don't really like me that much for some reason. Yeah, like on my final exam. Well, I mean, I skipped finals to go fly to. We went to this EdTech conference in Orlando.
Nice.
So I guess they don't really like me because of that.
No.
But we had to bring it to more teachers.
Well, they'll like you when you're the commencement speaker in a couple years.
Maybe,
hopefully.
So the workflow is where teachers, usually the students submit on Google Classroom or like Canvas. They submit a Google Doc or a PDF, and then the teacher opens it up, the doc, and they grade it within by like highlighting certain sections, adding comments, a summary of the feedback. So we do that whole process right in the Google Doc, and then we have the teacher review everything. They can speak to our system to understand their tone and their style. So then we add those comments.
How is the actual like testing and grading and homework process changing? Because I imagine that the solution to ChatGPT homework is probably everyone's on a laptop typing the answers in the classroom, and there's a monitor watching that you're not just AIing it, and then it can be AI graded, and then that's a win for everyone. Is that roughly what's happening?
Yeah, like the thing that we've seen is like people say all the time, like students are writing with ChatGPT, teachers are going to grade with AI. Like what's the whole point? But well, the objective of the student is to learn. And if you're just using like ChatGPT and mindlessly submitting something, well then you're not doing the right thing. There's always going to be a way to get around it. If you really don't want to learn. But like for teachers, the main like objective is to give students the best feedback and instruction. So what we're doing is just enabling them to do that a lot better, because even in school when like our teachers would give us just like generic copy paste feedback. So we just want to give students the best feedback possible.
Okay.
Give teachers their time back, and they really get the value because they're the ones experiencing the benefits.
Yeah. Talk to me about the top of funnel.
Why would you not at one point just give the tool to students as well?
Yeah, 100%. That's actually what we're working on next. So we just signed 3 contracts with schools last week.
Okay, congratulations.
And they want to be able to give this tool to students so that while they're writing, they're going to get real-time feedback on their Google Doc as if the teacher were adding comments in real time. So it's sort of like, you submit a rough draft to your teacher, they have to grade it, and then give it back to you, and then you can do a final draft. Instead of that, why not just have like the assistant give you feedback in real time?
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
On the doc.
Yeah, that's great.
Cool.
Talk to me about the top of funnel. How are you telling teachers that this works? I imagine at the price point you can't do hand-to-hand combat sales. How are you getting in front of teachers these days?
So we have 100 teachers that are paying completely out of pocket, and all of that has been organic through either the Chrome Web Store. So they find us when they install another extension like Grammarly. And then they tell their friends about it. So word of mouth has been really strong. We got 600,000 views on Instagram and Facebook in the past 30 days.
There we go.
We just started posting like memes and things like that, and teachers really they share it, and then they look at our page, and so they find us there.
That's great.
So that's the top of funnel up until this point, and we're going to start pumping out more like UGC style content.
Yeah, we're actually going to the biggest EdTech conference in the U.S.
Let's go.
At the end of this month.
The Super Bowl of EdTech.
Yeah, there's going to be 20,000 teachers there, and we got a really big. We bought a 400 square foot booth there, and we're going all out for it, trying to reach as many teachers as possible.
Congratulations!
How did you guys make your first money on the internet?
How did we first make
back in the day? I used to make websites for like random people. I charged like this pastor in New Jersey like $3,000 to his church a website.
Wow, there we go.
That was back when I was maybe 16.
There you go.
I made like a mental health chat app in like grade 10.
Nice.
And like a couple of people, like one person in Japan found it and they installed it and paid for it.
They paid for it.
Yeah.
Let's go. That's amazing. Congratulations. Have a great day.
Great to meet you, man.
Yeah. Bloom. Are you building Bloom filters?
No.
What are you?
So the easiest way to
Bloom and
explain,
onions.
Nope.
No. Okay, break it down.
No. So Lovable, but for native mobile apps.
Okay,
it's
cool.
The easiest way to explain.
Interesting.
We'd love to just like show you.
Please.
Okay, so have you guys tried to build mobile apps
3
before?
touches. What is that? I've never seen that interaction before. He's got a UI from the future.
So have you guys ever tried to build mobile apps?
Yes. I wrote Objective-C. It was terrible. I wrote Xcode. It was awful.
You're the perfect.
Sucks.
It's so good. We love Apple, but we're very excited about the Anthropic partnership.
Yeah, so typically you'll have to write code, you'll have to build the app in Xcode or something, you'll have to submit it for App Store review, you have to get your users to download it and test flight, enter an invite code. Okay, so with us, I can literally just like talk into my phone, build a native app, and then I can send it to you via literally bumping phones.
Oh, interesting.
Do you have an iPhone?
Yeah, I do.
Wow.
Let's see this.
And it'll just load the app
Let's
right
see.
onto the home screen.
Okay. Malware installed. All personal information extracted. Here we go.
I don't know.
I got one. Let me see.
Let's try again.
We got half.
I mean, this is just using AirDrop.
I think. Do you need to turn it on again? No. Oh no! Live demos.
AirDrop. Like maybe we need another.
Are
iPhone.
you on the same Wi-Fi?
You want to try?
Yeah, I'll try.
Let's see. AirDrop. AirDrop is on. Oh, contacts only.
Yeah, that's
now it's
probably
on
the
everyone.
issue.
Okay, I got it.
Okay, cool.
Let's try it now. There we go.
All
It was
right.
skill issue.
Coming.
Skill issue, maybe? Okay.
Oh, Jesus.
Is it going?
This is
I
all
got
Apple.
the wave. You saw the wave, right?
Yeah.
I only have
saw it
Ramp,
initially.
Public, Add Quick, 8 Sleep, Wander, and Puzzle installed right now. Those are the only apps I have.
Let's give it one more shot. You can take
Really?
it.
We tried,
Otherwise, we'll have to
refresh.
retry on your phone.
Yeah, it's okay. It's not like this is live or anything. Okay, you try.
We'll give it a shot. Anyways, keep while we're...
Yeah, so
let's try it.
So when someone like tries to build an app with Bloom, right?
It's doing the wave, but it's not doing that.
I think it's
don't
the
know.
internet. The internet just sucks.
I think the internet is not
Let's
great.
blame the internet.
Anyway, so what you would see is you'd be able to open this app on your phones like instantly, right?
Okay.
And it uses app clips under the hood.
Oh yeah. Okay.
very
Right. So
cool.
that's how you're getting the app on without me actually installing the full app. Cool.
Exactly. And then
you're really hacking the app clips thing. That's awesome. Okay. Yeah. Cool.
And so the other thing is like when you prompt to build an app with us, we also automatically deploy a backend for you that real time syncs data between devices.
As I understand app clips, it's like it's like there's like one app, like the Uber app exists, and then there's an app clip that ties to Uber. Are you creating like custom app clips? It's all around one iOS.
Exactly.
Oh wow!
It's one Bloom app clip
One
that
Bloom
then
app.
loads apps
whatever
from anyone.
so it's like an app store within an app store.
Yeah, kind of thing like that.
Wait, I mean, I don't want to say that. We don't want to say those words.
We've talked on our show before about this idea of like ephemeral apps, like apps as like memes.
Exactly.
Like there's a lot of things that should exist, but only for like a day.
Yeah,
exactly.
We've had so many ideas for like funny apps, but we don't want to actually go pay, find someone
it used to be there's so many people
difficult.
have an idea for an app, and you're like, well, you realize it'll cost like $1 million to build that.
Exactly.
Like it's not actually valuable.
Exactly. Like with us, we built an app for demo day in 5 minutes that everyone in the audience could just scan to like vote on our valuation in 5 years, and it like had a graph that updated in real time for everyone because it has a backend connected to it. And so what we want to enable is a creator economy, but for software.
Okay, under the hood, what are the best code generation LLMs that you're using? What do you like? What's exciting, and how is that market developing?
Yeah, so I mean, right now we're obviously for the smartest models we're using Claude 4 Sonnet.
Claude 4.
But we're also experimenting with a smart mode and a fast mode because sometimes people just want to make like a quick edit to their app, and like literally you can just speak into our phones, right? You just go into like this like edit mode, and then you can just type, hey, add this feature or whatever.
Very cool.
And so sometimes you just want those changes fast. And what's cool is like if you had this app open, it would also hot reload on your device. Right? So
very cool.
What use cases are you most excited about? What are you seeing? What categories broadly?
Yeah, I mean, so right now we're seeing people that already think of software as a creative outlet use this. So developers, designers, and entrepreneurs. So especially for designers and non-technical entrepreneurs, it's great because they can just like their creativity gets unlocked with this. And so we're seeing people build all kinds of things like personal apps, but also apps that I wouldn't have imagined before, like someone in Africa building like a wildlife tracking app for their conservation. And then people building like funny apps for
to
weddings.
Find the most delicious animals to go after. To conserve the animals for my own hunting. For my next hunting expedition.
But yeah, what I'm really excited about is like the apps that I can't even imagine, right? It's kind of like when the YouTube founders put out YouTube, I'm sure they weren't imagining vlogging.
Mr. Beast or MKBHD.
Exactly.
Just like, you put out images in ChatGPT. They didn't really imagine Studio Dollar happening.
And for us, I mean, it's software, so you can literally do anything.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
How's the round going?
Oh, round is closed.
Oh, there we go.
Let's go. All right. Pleasure, guys.
Goodbye.
Good.
Meta is paying $15 billion. I thought it was 14, 15, something like that, for a 49% stake in Scale AI that pays out investors and employees. CEO Alex Wang is leaving to join Meta and head up a superintelligence lab. Feels like those licensed and acquired deals at Character AI, Inflection, and Adept to avoid regulatory scrutiny, says Tane, who's been on the show. This is from The Information. You got to hit the size gong 15 times for Alex Wang. Let's hear it for a fantastic
I just
outcome.
pulled out my
your headphones.
audio,
You just
so
got
I'm going to
rocked.
need to let you hit the size gong.
I will hit the gong. I will hit the gong. Where's the gong mallet? Oh, it's over there.
Where's the mallet?
It's over there. Here we go.
Technical difficulties.
Lots of difficulties, but we got it done. Congratulations
that was not
to
15
Scale AI.
hits, John, but
that wasn't 15 hits, but it was one big one, and it's very exciting. I'm a big fan of Alex Wang. I've met him. I interviewed him on stage at an event about a year ago, and he has a ton of really deep insight into artificial intelligence, and I'm sure he's going to be an absolute beast in the boardroom.
An absolute dog.
Hopefully, he can get a board seat.
A boardroom general.
He's a boardroom general.
So it's funny when these kind of deals are a relatively recent phenomena.
Yes.
We saw this with Character AI.
To Google.
Adept
to Amazon. And Inflection to Microsoft. And now Scale AI to Meta.
And the interesting thing here, I was talking with an early Scale AI investor this morning, and they just still didn't, I think the deal is still in the works. They didn't have full insight into how exactly it was structured. The question is, Meta's paying $15 billion for 49% of Scale AI, and Scale AI, through that, is losing their CEO to Meta. Now, Scale AI is a very big business. They have a ton of customers that I imagine are going to want to continue to work with Scale AI. The question becomes what happens to the actual EV of Scale AI in a scenario where half of it is owned by a hyperscaler who has very different incentive structure than a traditional acquirer. The positive here is that
didn't you talk to somebody at Character or Adept or Inflection? You talked to somebody who was
so
at
I talked to what happened with Character is basically like the cap table was effectively wiped out and reset, and to my
but not
knowledge,
wiped out,
not
like
wiped
cashed out to
cashed
the tune
out.
of a very high
Character,
valuation. So they're happy.
AI
Everyone's
is now,
happy. That's the thing
Character
with these
AI
deals.
ended up in a situation where they had this massive balance sheet, no investors, no preferred shareholders. It was effectively is effectively, to my knowledge, community employee owned. And I don't think that's what's happening here, but it is seemingly clear that the founders, the team, and the investors in Scale AI will be getting paid out, I would imagine, pro rata based on that $15 billion mark. And the thing that's wild here is, so it's
an up round for everyone. Everyone gets cashed out, gets a ton of money. Alex gets to go work in like a hyperscaler on super intelligence and actually like take a run at some really serious like high technology.
The thing that was ultimately surprising here is
so Scale AI has more than $900 million in cash on its balance sheet at the end of last year, according to financial information shared with prospective investors. They've raised more than $1.5 billion from investors, so they only burned $600 million of that. Like they kept more than half of it. The company made $870 million in revenue last year and expected more than $2 billion this year, and it lost about $150 million. So doing pretty well. There is a world where like Scale AI as a company, even though they're not wholly owned by Meta, they are independent and they have $900 million war chest, and they can go build a great business and do a bunch of stuff there. And then the relationship with Meta can be a fantastic growth engine.
The only reason this was surprising to me, well, I guess one, it's Scale AI was, if you're trying to build a new research lab, they're probably going to need to still acquire a lot of other top talent. You can imagine Meta going and trying to bring into people from Anthropic or OpenAI into this new organization. But it felt like Scale. I do wonder if Scale's team could go back and see Circle's IPO and the success of that. If they would have still done this deal, because Scale AI
could have ripped in the public markets.
Circle IPO showed that the public markets are very receptive to pure play technology bets that have great narrative around them. And I could easily, seeing what Circle has traded at, I could see Scale trading well beyond this valuation they're getting from Meta.
I agree with you. The question is, how does the liquidity picture, what does the liquidity picture look like in that scenario?
They wouldn't, insiders wouldn't have been able to unload 15 billion. 15 billion.
Like, does that actually play out? Because Yes, the stock could have traded up to 100 billion market cap, but can you actually, if you're an investor, can you actually get liquidity without crashing the stock if you're putting 15 billion of downward pressure? That's
a lot.
Big question. We'll have to dig into
ultimately, huge pickup for Zuck. I think Alex, will continue to execute very well, and I could imagine he'll be a huge part of recruiting.
He's done a fantastic job. He's been everything. He's been on everything from like the Theo Vaughn podcast to testifying in front of Capitol Hill and lawmakers. He's got a ton of range. He's very able to storytell and do creative deals, which increasingly are extremely valuable in the world where the AI paradigms, like the secrets, are known. It's about, okay, how can you actually marshal the capital and the will to build the hyperscale data center, to actually go and get Jensen to fork over 100,000 H200s on schedule. I'm sure there's a ton of different things in the works.
And it's interesting for Meta too, even if they're able to leverage the Scale team to simply get better at ads. They can make back the 15 billion. In
there's a ton of different ways this works out, and I mean they clearly need a lot more reinforcement learning training data to improve Llama 4 because they need a reasoning model if they're going to stay in the game. That's clearly the next paradigm, and a big part of what we learned about from semi-analysis this week was that verifiable rewards are really important in reinforcement learning. Scale AI pioneered that humanities last exam. They've been in like the evals game defining the rewards that you would work against in the reinforcement learning paradigm. And so there's a whole bunch of ways that plugging Alex and the Scale team in makes a ton of sense.
Meta has to attack. They need a layer that they can control that everybody else depends on. And this looks like their play at it. The other thing I think is interesting about that I've been thinking about is how many of these big AI companies have effectively been acquired in ways that the government doesn't get to approve. It's the big talent acquisitions. When I saw this, I was like, that looks like an acquisition the FTC doesn't get to approve. Yep. And so I don't know if that's the motivation. Have not spoken to any of the parties. We're not in Scale AI. But my sense is you're basically seeing the Game of Thrones play out, but the government is one of the houses.
What's very interesting about that is that we are... Yeah, Lena Khan's gone, and we're in a different regime, but it's the same thing.
Let us do some acquisitions. Let us do some M&A.
Just totally. One $28 billion acquisition. Just let us sneak it in. It's fine.
Let's get it by.
Just
one. Let's get the M&A window open.
Investor, I mean, the other thing I say is, when was the last time you heard a big tech company buy a company for $80 million? It felt like that used to happen all the time.
All the time. Yep.
And now it's a lot less common for a variety of reasons.
They took that from us.
They took that from us.
I think.
I feel the grief.
Yeah, I mean, there used to be a really great outcome for a lot of folks where if you're a founder and you start and you still own 20-30% of a company and you sell it for $80 million, like that's a house in Palo Alto and kids and generational wealth in some ways. And yeah, that has gone by the wayside. I don't exactly know why, because those seem to be easier to get across the finish line from an FTC perspective, but I guess folks just
I mean, at what point does the FTC just say, like, look, we can see what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, also
spent $15 billion on this company and the CEO no longer works there.
I mean, the flip side. Yeah, I mean, the flip side is, like, when was the last time a company was valued at $80 million? Because every company it seems to go straight from $5 million to $500 million in 2 days, and so I don't know where you're getting $80 million. Like that's just hard to find. Let's talk about the most recent deal, Meta acquiring Scale AI. 49% of the company is changing hands, I believe, at around $14 or $15 billion.
Spiritually, the whole thing.
Yes,
but technically.
yes. What has been your reaction, and what have you learned from reporting on that?
Yeah, I think you just covered that they have a new CEO. So break it all
down. We just reported that, per our sources, that they have picked the new CEO to be Jason Droege, former VP. He's currently, at Scale being promoted, and he was formerly an Uber a VP and formerly also a partner in VC at Benchmark. So, but that's just the latest, right? We have really been breaking the news on this front. We had a scoop this Saturday night that we were the first ones to report that these talks were happening for Meta to make this multi-billion investment in Scale. I think it really caught a lot of people by surprise in the industry. This is a huge investment planned on Meta's front, right? Probably their biggest ever in a company. And I think it's a sign that Zuckerberg is ready to go full on founder mode and try to catch up on AI. And this last Llama 4 release was, widely considered a disappointment. And so how do you change course,
bring in
right?
Fresh
maybe
blood.
It's this big investment and this super intelligence lab, and he's recruiting engineers. We've reported on that. They're making crazy high offers, right? They will open, Zuck will open the checkbook for the top talent.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing that stood out about some of, people were just reporting the headline numbers of saying, oh, you could make,
9 figures was the number.
Yeah, 9 figures, but you have to look, if you're trying to recruit somebody that joined OpenAI 2-3 years ago, they're probably run rating at $10 million a year already on a fully loaded comp basis. So I think it makes sense. What have you learned about the future of the Scale business, right? Is Jason going to be, pounding the pavement, trying to get more customers for the core business, continue to adapt the core business?
There's a lot of Scale competitors right now that are saying like, hey, we're going to take a lot of
deals. They're foaming at the mouth.
Because we're going to use this to our advantage when we go to the other hyperscalers and say, do you want to do business with a company that's owned by Facebook or Meta?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really unclear what's going to happen with the future of Scale's business. Obviously the Meta investment, that's expected. You could see partnerships happening there on that front. But what will happen with the other customers, I think we don't know. And what will happen with, other competitors in this space? Could they start to gain ground as Scale deepens its ties with Meta? We'll see. I think what we do know, we have reported that Alex Wang plans to join Meta. I think for Meta, he is seen as someone who is just sort of reinvigorating, their AI team and this renewed AI effort. He's a big name. He's incredibly savvy, very well connected, and built a real business with Scale. So, I think that's where we're at. We're in the middle of the deal. We're waiting, to see all the official details sort of as this plays out.